Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was an adventurer without a Falna, the true sage of the wild Naruto x Ryuu lion DanMachi. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Stranger from Beyond. Darkness. Then pain. Sharp, insistent, radiating through his skull like lightning. Naruto Uzumaki's eyes snapped open to unfamiliar stone walls glistening with moisture. The air thick with the scent of moss and something else, something primal and wrong. Not Konoha, not anywhere he recognized. His body responded before his mind fully awakened, muscle memory roll. Ing him sideways as something massive crashed into the space he'd occupied seconds before. Stone fragments pelted his back as he found his footing, crouched low, senses expanding outward. What the hell, he muttered, blinking away disorientation. The creature before him resembled nothing from his world, bipedal but hunched, with skin like volcanic rock and eyes that glowed crimson in the dimness. It bellowed, the sound echoing through what Naruto now recognized as some kind of underground labyrinth. Instinctively, his hands formed the familiar cross-shaped seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Expected surge of chakra responded, but differently. Instead of the clean, controlled flow he'd mastered over years of training, this felt wild, almost effervescent. The energy bubbled and twisted rough his pathways like carbonated water, and when his clones appeared, there were only two instead of the dozen he'd intended. Something's off with my chakra, he muttered as the clones flanked the creature. The monster lunged again. Naruto leapt, his body still responding with the honed reflexes of a shinobi, but the jump carried him higher than expected. He twisted mid-air, momentarily disoriented by the altered physics, then delivered a devastating axe kick to the creature's skull. The impact resonated through his leg, far more solid than striking human flesh. The monster staggered but didn't fall. Tough bastard, he grunted, landing lightly. Let's try something else. He extended his hand, concentrating on forming a Rasengan. The chakra gathered, swirling into the familiar spiraling sphere. But it felt different, wilder, more connected to the stone around him, as though drawing energy not just from within but from without. When he slammed the Rasengan into the creature's chest, the effect was explosive. The monster disintegrated into crystalline dust, leaving behind only a small, gleaming stone that clattered against the cavern floor. Naruto stood panting, staring at the stone, then at his hand. What was that, and where the hell am I? His clones approached, looking equally confused. Boss, one said, check this out. He pointed to strange markings on the cavern walls, not writing exactly, but purposeful designs that seemed to pulse faintly with an inner light. Before Naruto could investigate further, a distant scream echoed through the tunnels, human this time, filled with panic and pain. Release, he said, dispelling the clones and absorbing their experiences. Then, guided by instinct and the echoes, he sprinted through the labyrinthine passages toward the source of the cry. The tunnel system was vast and unnatural, floors too smooth in some places, walls carved with the same strange symbols he'd noticed earlier. More of the stone creatures appeared, some smaller, some larger than the first, but now anticipating their movements and resilience, Naruto dispatched them efficiently, conserving his altered chakra. The screams grew louder, intermixed with the sounds of combat, metal striking stone, incantations in an unfamiliar language, the roars of creatures larger than those he'd encountered. He rounded a corner and found chaos. A group of, perhaps a dozen humanoids, actual humans, he realized with relief, fought desperately against a swarm of monsters. Several already lay wounded, while the others formed a defensive perimeter. They wore matching uniforms beneath varied armor, suggesting some kind of organized unit. Most striking was a golden-haired woman at the center of the formation. She moved with grace that even Naruto found impressive, her sword a blur of silver light as she cut down monster after monster. But even she was being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Without hesitation, Naruto launched himself into the fray. Get down, he shouted in warning, hands already moving through seals. To their credit, the fighters responded instantly to the unexpected voice, ducking low as Naruto unleashed a great breakthrough technique. The wind jutsu tore through the chamber, modified by the strange energy infusing his chakra, creating not just a powerful gust but a storm of slicing air currents that shredded the front line of monsters. In the moment of respite, Naruto landed among the fighters. Who? Began a green-haired woman with glasses, but Naruto cut her off. Explanations later. What's the plan? The blonde SWORDS woman stared at him with penetrating golden eyes. We need to reach the stairwell, she said simply, gesturing toward a passage on the far side of the chamber. Naruto nodded once, analyzing the tactical situation. I'll clear a path. You get your wounded moving. Without waiting for agreement, he formed the cross seal again. This time, anticipating the altered chakra response, he adjusted his technique. 6 clones materialized. Not his usual number, but enough. The original fighters watched in open astonishment as multiple identical Narutos charged into the monster horde, each moving with the same fluid confidence as the original. What magic is this? Someone murmured. The blonde woman simply adjusted her grip on her sword. Riveria, Chiona, help me follow his opening. Everyone else, get the wounded moving when we create the gap. Naruto and his clones tore through the monsters with coordinated attacks, each clone fighting with years of battle experience. The original Naruto found himself alongside the blonde swordswoman, their movements unconsciously synchronizing as they cut through the enemy ranks. You're good, he said, driving a Rasengan through a particularly large monster that resembled a gorilla made of obsidian. What do you call these things anyway? Monsters, she replied economically, her sword decapitating 2 smaller creatures in a single swing. That was an obsidian ape. These are dungeon lizards. And you're unusual. Naruto grinned despite the situation. You have no idea. Working together, they cleared the path to the stairwell. Naruto's clones provided rear guard protection as the wounded were evacuated, the original Naruto and the core fighters being the last to retreat up the stone steps. As they ascended, the monsters pursued Chili but stopped at some invisible boundary near the stairwell entrance, roaring in frustration but advancing no further. They don't like to come too close to the upper floors when there's a large party, explained a cheerful dark-haired girl with twin ponytails who fought with some kind of transforming staff. I'm Chiona, by the way. That was amazing. Are you a new spirit contractor? Which familia are you with? Naruto blinked at the barrage of unfamiliar terms. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, he replied, deciding to stick with what he knew for certain. And I have no idea what you're talking about or where I am. This prompted stares from the entire group. They had reached a wider passage now, better lit with what looked like magical crystals embedded in the walls. The blonde woman studied him with increased intensity. I am Ace Wallenstein of Loki Familia. This is the dungeon beneath Orario. Everyone knows this. Her tone wasn't accusatory, merely stating facts. Well, I'm not from around here, Naruto replied, scratching the back of his head. Last thing I remember, I was. He paused, frowning. The memory felt slippery, just beyond reach. I was fighting someone important, then there was a light, and I woke up here. Fascinating, said the green-haired woman, Riveria, he recalled, adjusting her glasses. Your magic is unlike anything I've seen, yet you claim ignorance of even basic knowledge about Orario. What god granted you your blessing? God. No god granted me anything, Naruto replied, increasingly confused. Look, is there somewhere we can talk that doesn't involve stone hallways and monsters? I've got a lot of questions, and it sounds like you do too. The fighters exchanged glances. We were heading back to the surface anyway, said a handsome man with light green hair. Loki will definitely want to meet this one. Ace nodded once. Follow us. We'll take you to Orario. As they continued upward through the dungeon levels, Naruto observed his unexpected companions. Despite their injuries, they maintained formation with practiced discipline. They referred to monsters by classification names, suggesting a systematic knowledge of their environment. Most intriguing were their casual references to familia and gods, as though such things were commonplace. For their part, the fighters, particularly Chiona and a cat person named Aki, peppered Naruto with questions he couldn't answer. How had he created copies of himself? Was that really magic without a chant? How had he entered the deeper dungeon levels alone? The dungeon itself changed as they ascended. Lower levels had been dark, claustrophobic, with strange organic textures to the walls. Upper levels became more uniform, better lit, with smaller and fewer monsters. "We're approaching Babel," Ace explained as they reached a massive circular chamber with a spiral staircase. Sunlight filtered down from high above. "The dungeon entrance." Naruto nodded, squinting upward. "So that's the way out." "To Orario," she confirmed. The city built around the dungeon. They emerged into blinding daylight and a scene that stole Naruto's breath. He stood at the base of a colossal white tower that stretched skyward like a gleaming spine. Around it sprawled a city unlike any he'd seen, a fusion of architectural styles spanning what seemed like centuries of development, with structures of stone, wood, and materials he couldn't identify. And everywhere, people, humans, yes, but also cat people, dog people, short stocky folk with beards, tall elegant figures with pointed ears. They flowed through streets like blood through veins, engaged in commerce, conversation, conflict, life. "Welcome to Orario," said Tiona with a grin, watching his expression. "City of adventurers." "Adventurers. Those who enter the dungeon to fight monsters," explained Riveria patiently. "Like us. We are members of Loki Familia, followers of the goddess Loki." "Goddess," Naruto repeated flatly. "You keep using that word." "The gods live among us," Ace said simply, as though this explained everything. "They grant their blessing, Falna, to mortals who join their familia. This allows us to develop abilities beyond normal limits." Naruto's mind raced, trying to process this information. A world where gods walked openly among mortals, granting powers through some kind of blessing system. Organized groups delving into monster-filled dungeons. A city built around such activities. "And everyone who fights monsters has this Falna?" he asked. "All adventurers." "Yes," confirmed the handsome man. "Bet," he'd learned. "Which makes you even stranger. You fought like a first-class adventurer but claim no Falna." "Impossible." Naruto shrugged. "Where I'm from, we don't have gods handing out blessings. We develop chakra, our life energy, through training and practice." This statement was met with skeptical looks. "Let's continue this at the manor," Riveria suggested. "We need to report to Loki anyway, and our wounded require attention." As they traversed the city, Naruto absorbed everything. The Babel Tower formed the city's central axis, with districts radiating outward like wheel spokes. Buildings grew older and less maintained toward the outer walls. People recognized the Loki Familia members, stepping aside respectfully or calling greetings. The manor itself was a sprawling compound that spoke of wealth and influence. Inside, medical staff immediately attended to the wounded while the senior members, along with Naruto, were directed to a meeting room. A woman with crimson hair and mischievous eyes lounged on a throne-like chair, feet propped irreverently on a polished table. Despite her casual posture, Naruto instantly sensed something different about her, an aura of contained power utterly unlike anything he'd felt before. "My darling children return," she exclaimed, eyes closed to slits as she grinned widely. "And with a stray. My, what an interesting soul you've brought home." Naruto felt himself being assessed despite her seemingly closed eyes. It reminded him uncomfortably of facing Kurama for the first time, the sense of being measured by something far older and more powerful than it appeared. "Goddess Loki," Riveria began formally, "we encountered difficulties on the 24th floor. This man, Naruto Uzumaki, intervened and assisted our retreat. His abilities are unusual." Loki swung her legs down and leaned forward, suddenly intense. "Unusual how?" "He created duplicates of himself," Ace stated. "Used magic without a chant. Claims to have no Falna." Loki's eyebrows shot upward. She stood in a fluid motion and approached Naruto, circling him like a predator. "No Falna, Mind if I check?" "Check what?" Naruto asked warily. "Your back, darling. The Falna manifests as a hieroglyph between the shoulder blades. Even if you've forgotten joining a familia, the mark would remain." Naruto hesitated, then shrugged. "Fine." He turned and pulled up his torn and dirty jacket and mesh shirt, exposing his back to the room. He heard several sharp intakes of breath. "Fascinating," Loki murmured, uncomfortably close. Her finger traced something on his skin. "No Falna whatsoever. But what's this design?" "It's not a hieroglyph I recognize." "That's a seal," Naruto explained, remembering the 8 trigrams seal that contained Kurama. It's complicated. I bet it is, Loki replied, sounding delighted. And you performed high-level magic without a Falna. Impossible by the laws I know. Naruto turned back around, readjusting his clothing. Like I told your people, I'm not from around here. Where I come from, we use chakra, our own life energy. No gods involved. No gods. Loki laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, I like this one. He's either the most interesting mortal I've met in centuries or the most accomplished liar. Her expression sharpened. Let's find out which, shall we? Show me this chakra of yours. Naruto considered his options. These people had helped him, and he needed information. A small demonstration seemed reasonable. He formed a single hand seal, focusing on the altered flow of energy he'd experienced in the dungeon. A single clone appeared beside him, perfect in every detail. Loki circled them both, poking the clone experimentally. Solid, not an illusion. She looked between them. Which is the original? Both Narutos grinned identically. I am, they said in unison. Loki laughed again. Cheeky. I do like that. She pressed a finger suddenly against the clone's forehead. But this one has thinner energy. You're the copy, aren't you? The clone shrugged, acknowledging the point before Naruto dispelled it. Interesting, Loki mused. It's not spirit magic, not arcanum either. She tapped her chin. You're a genuine mystery, Naruto Uzumaki. And I adore mysteries. Great, Naruto replied dryly. Maybe in exchange for satisfying your curiosity, you can help me figure out where I am and how to get home. A fair exchange, Loki agreed. But first, you need rest, food, and probably a bath. No offense, but you smell like 3 days in the dungeon. We'll provide accommodations tonight, and tomorrow we can continue our cultural exchange. Naruto wanted to press for more immediate answers, but exhaustion suddenly crashed over him. The chakra expenditure in an unfamiliar environment had drained him more than he'd realized. Fine, he conceded, but tomorrow, I want real answers. As do I, Loki replied with that unsettling grin. As do I. Water cascaded over Naruto's shoulders, washing away grime and blood. The Loki Familia Manor's bathing facilities were luxurious compared to anything in Konoha, more like hot springs than simple showers. Alone for tea. He first time since awakening in this strange world, Naruto closed his eyes and concentrated on his inner landscape. The familiar sewers materialized around him as he sought the connection to his oldest companion. Kurama, you there? Silence greeted him. The massive gate where the Nine Tails usually lounged stood empty, though not broken. The connection remained, but somehow muted, distant. Great, Naruto muttered, opening his eyes and returning to the physical world. Even you're acting weird here. He finished bathing and dressed in borrowed clothes, simple but well-made garments that approximated his usual style in black and orange. Someone had even attempted to clean his headband, though the metal remained scratched. A servant, an actual servant, which felt strange to Naruto, led him to a dining hall where several Loki Familia members had gathered for the evening meal. Conversations paused briefly as he entered, then resumed with increased energy, now clearly centered on him. Chiona waved enthusiastically, patting a seat beside her. Whisker face. Come sit with us. Naruto smiled despite himself. Her exuberance reminded him of his younger self. As he navigated to the offered seat, he passed Wallenstein, who watched him with that same golden, analytical gaze. He nodded acknowledgement, and after a moment, she returned the gesture with the slightest inclination of her head. You've made quite the impression, said a cheerful voice as he sat down. A handsome young man with mint green hair extended his hand. Fin Diemni, captain of Loki Familia. I was reviewing our reports from the others while you were getting settled. Naruto Uzumaki, he replied, shaking the offered hand. He noted the man's short stature but sensed an unmistakable strength and authority about him. So I've heard, repeatedly and with increasing embellishment, Fin said with a smile. According to Chiona, you single-handedly slaughtered 100 monsters while walking on air. Naruto laughed. Slight exaggeration. I said 20 monsters, not 100. Chiona protested through a mouthful of food. And he did walk on air. I saw it. I can walk on walls and water, Naruto clarified. It's basic chakra control where I'm from. This casual statement provoked another round of exclamations and questions, which Naruto answered between bites of unfamiliar but delicious food. The Oki Familia members had apparently decided he wasn't a threat, or at least, not an immediate one, and curiosity had overcome caution. As the meal progressed, Naruto gathered valuable information in return. Orario was indeed a city built around the dungeon, a mysterious structure that continuously spawned monsters. Adventurers from various familia delved into its depths, slaying monsters and collecting magic stones that powered everything from lighting to transportation. The gods, actual divine beings, had descended from the upper world, out of boredom, restricting their divine powers but living among mortals for entertainment. Each formed a familia, granting their Falna to followers, who developed abilities classified as strength, endurance, dexterity, agility, magic, and various skills. So every adventurer has a god's blessing, Naruto summarized. And without one, people don't develop special abilities. Exactly, confirmed Riveria, which makes your capabilities impossible by our understanding. Naruto shrugged. Different world, different rules. This casual reference to another world caused another ripple of reactions. You truly believe you're from another world entirely? Asked Finn, leaning forward with interest. It's the only explanation that makes sense, Naruto replied. Your monsters, magic, gods, none of it exists where I'm from. And the way my chakra feels different here. He shook his head. Something pulled me across dimensions. Before anyone could respond, the dining hall doors burst open dramatically. Loki sauntered in, followed by a tall, silver-haired woman of breathtaking beauty whose very presence seemed to command attention. Look who I ran into while spreading the word about our interesting guest, Loki announced, gesturing grandly. Freya herself, curious about the rumors already circulating. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Naruto noticed the Loki Familia members subtly tensing, Finn's pleasant expression becoming carefully neutral. The silver-haired woman, Freya, studied Naruto with unsettling intensity. Her eyes were multicolored, shifting between hues as she approached. Unlike Loki's mischievous aura, Freya radiated something both alluring and dangerous. So this is the mortal without a Falna who fights like a hero, she said, her voice melodious yet somehow predatory. How fascinating. Naruto met her gaze steadily. Naruto Uzumaki. Freya, she replied simply, as though the name alone should convey everything. Goddess of beauty, love, and war. Something in her tone reminded Naruto uncomfort. Ably of Kagaya, the absolute certainty of her own power and importance. You have the most unusual soul I've ever seen, Freya continued, circling him much as Loki had earlier. Wild and bright, but with shadows twisting through it. And something else, something ancient dwelling within. Her eyes widened slightly. How extraordinary. Naruto stiffened. She could sense Kurama. I'm a complicated person, he said lightly. Indeed. Freya's smile was beautiful and terrifying simultaneously. I would very much like to add you to my collection. I'm not a thing to be collected, Naruto replied, an edge entering his voice. Everything beautiful belongs in my collection eventually, Freya stated as though it were natural law. But I'm patient. For unique treasures, I can wait. She turned to Loki. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll be watching with interest. With that, she glided from the room, leaving a charged silence in her wake. Well, Loki said, clapping her hands together, that was predictable. Word of advice, Whisker Boy, when Freya wants something, she usually gets it. And she clearly wants you. What exactly does that mean? Naruto asked warily. It means, Finn explained carefully, that the most powerful goddess in Orario has marked you as a target of interest. She'll attempt to recruit you to her familia, one way or another. I already told her I'm not interested in being collected. Several people around the table exchanged glances. It may not be that simple, Riveria said. Freya's methods can be persistent. Naruto shrugged. They dealt with persistent enemies before. She's not exactly an enemy, Chiona piped up. Just scary and obsessive and super powerful. Perfect, Naruto muttered. Been here less than a day and I've already got a goddess stalker. This broke the tension, laughter rippling around the table. You'll fit right in, Loki declared, stealing food from Bet's plate despite his protests. Orario specializes in complicated situations. After dinner, Naruto was shown to a comfortable guest room. Exhaustion pulled at him, but his mind raced with everything he'd learned. Another world. Gods walking among mortals. A dungeon that spawned monsters indefinitely. And somewhere in all this strangeness, perhaps an explanation for how he'd arrived and how to return home. He formed a familiar cross seal, creating 2 clones. Keep watch. He instructed one, which nodded and took position by the window. To the other, he said, try to gather sage energy. I want to know if it works the same way here. As the clone settled into a meditative pose, Naruto himself finally surrendered to sleep, dreaming of forests and dungeons melding into one endless labyrinth. Morning brought clarity and a renewed sense of purpose. Naruto awoke to find his clone still meditating, eyes rimmed with the distinctive orange pigmentation of sage mode. Well? Naruto asked, instantly alert. The clone opened golden, toad-like eyes. It works, but differently. The natural energy here feels wilder, less structured, more abundant too, especially flowing up from beneath the city. From the dungeon, Naruto realized. That's why my chakra felt strange down there. It was mixing with the natural energy. He dispelled both clones, absorbing their experiences and knowledge. The meditation clones' memories were particularly interesting. Flashes of energy flowing through the city like rivers, concentrating around certain buildings where he now knew gods resided. After a quick breakfast, Naruto found himself summoned to a different meeting room where Loki waited with Finn, Riveria, and surprisingly, Ace. Good morning, sunshine, Loki greeted. Ready for our information exchange? More than ready, Naruto confirmed, taking a seat. I need to figure out how I got here and how to get back. Understandable, Finn nodded. But first, perhaps you could explain more about this chakra and your world. The more we understand, the better we can help identify potential parallels. For the next hour, Naruto explained the basics of his world, shinobi villages, chakra theory, the different nations. He demonstrated basic techniques, explained his sage training, and carefully described the 9-tail ceiling without revealing too many sensitive details. His audience listened with varying reactions, Loki with gleeful fascination, Finn with tactical interest, Riveria with scholarly attention to detail. Ace remained largely impassive, though her eyes tracked his every movement when he demonstrated techniques. So in summary, Riveria said when he finished, you come from a world where humans channel internal energy without divine assistance, organized into hidden villages of warriors serving different nations. With certain individuals containing sealed monsters that grant them additional powers. That's pretty accurate, yeah, Naruto acknowledged. And the last thing you remember before awakening here? Pressed Finn. Naruto frowned, probing the slippery memory. I was fighting someone important. There was a flash of light, a feeling of being pulled apart, then darkness until I woke up in your dungeon. Interesting, Loki mused. It sounds like some form of spatial magic. We have teleportation magic here, but cross-dimensional travel. That's beyond even the gods' current capabilities. Current. Naruto caught the qualification. Loki smiled mysteriously. The gods restricted our divine powers, our arcanum, when descending to the lower world. Using arcanum is forbidden, with severe consequences. But before that limitation, who knows what was possible? Are you suggesting a god brought me here? It's one possibility, Finn acknowledged. Though the question remains, why? No one had an immediate answer. What about historical records? Riveria suggested. If something similar has happened before, perhaps the guild archives would contain references. Good thinking, Loki agreed. We should introduce our interdimensional friend to the guild anyway. They'll want to know about someone operating outside the Falna system. What's the guild? Naruto asked. The organization that manages dungeon exploration, monster threats, and maintains balance between familia, explained Finn. They'll be very interested in you. Great. Naruto sighed. More people wanting to study me. It's necessary. Ace spoke for the first time. Without guild recognition, you'll face challenges operating in Orario. Other familia might consider you a threat. Naruto glanced at her, surprised by the practical concern. Fair enough. Let's meet this guild. The guild headquarters occupied an imposing building near Babel Tower. Inside, The main hall bustled with adventurers submitting reports, collecting rewards, or reviewing mission postings on a massive board. Naruto received curious stares as he followed Loki and Finn to a reception desk. His borrowed clothes marked him as an outsider, and his whisker markings always drew attention. A half-elf woman with mint green hair looked up from her paperwork, then froze at the sight of Loki. "Gee, Goddess Loki, how unexpected. How may the guild assist you today?" "Aina, darling." Loki draped herself dramatically over the counter. "I've brought someone special for registration. A unique case requiring your delicate touch." The woman, Aina, adjusted her glasses nervously. "What kind of unique case?" Finn stepped forward. "This is Naruto Uzumaki. He possesses combat abilities comparable to a high-level adventurer but lacks a Falna. We believe he may be displaced from elsewhere." Aina blinked rapidly. "Without a Falna, that's impossible." And yet, Loki gestured theatrically to Naruto. "Here he stands, impossible in the flesh." A tall, stern man approached, clearly having overheard. "Perhaps this discussion should continue in private. Loki, Finn, if you would follow me. Bring your unusual friend." They were led to an office dominated by bookshelves and a large desk. The man introduced himself as Royman Mardial, guild director. "Now then," he said after they were seated, "explain this impossibility." Loki and Finn summarized Naruto's appearance and abilities while Aina took notes, her expression growing increasingly astonished. Naruto demonstrated a simple clone technique when requested, causing Royman to choke on his tea. "This is unprecedented," the director sputtered. "The implications for our understanding of the Falna system are fascinating." "Yes," Loki interrupted. "But more immediately, we need to establish Naruto's legal status. He needs to function in Orario while we determine how he arrived and potentially how to return him home." "Legal status?" Naruto asked. "Can't I just exist here?" "Orario runs on systems," Aina explained gently. "Adventurers belong to Familia, which grants certain rights and responsibilities. Independent operation in the dungeon requires guild authorization, typically granted only to recognized Familia members. So I need to join a Familia to function here." Naruto frowned. "That presents another problem," Finn noted. "Can someone without capacity for Falna even join a Familia in the traditional sense?" Royman stroked his chin. "There is precedent for non-adventurer Familia members, supporters, craftspeople, and such. But someone actively entering the dungeon without Falna protection." He shook his head. "The mortality rate would be astronomical." "Except he's already demonstrated high-level combat capabilities," Loki pointed out. "My darlings witnessed it firsthand." "Perhaps a special designation," suggested Aina. "An independent contractor status, with mandatory reporting requirements to monitor his safety and activities." Royman nodded slowly. "Yes, that might work. We could issue a provisional adventurer identification with special notations. And naturally," Loki added with a predatory smile, "since my Familia discovered him, we would retain primary sponsorship rights." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Don't I get a say in this?" "Of course," Aina assured him quickly. "But you do need some form of official recognition to operate within Orario, particularly if you intend to enter the dungeon again." "Which I do," Naruto confirmed. "If I arrived through the dungeon, answers about getting home might be found there too." "Then guild registration is necessary," Royman declared. "Tuli, prepare the special authorization forms. Loki, as sponsor, your Familia will bear responsibility for any incidents until he's fully acclimated." "Gladly," Loki agreed, far too readily for Naruto's comfort. The administrative process took hours. Forms were completed, statements recorded, demonstrations of abilities documented. By midday, Naruto possessed a special identification tablet marking him as an independent contracted specialist, with provisional dungeon access rights. "This grants you basic operating authority within Orario," Aina explained, handing over the tablet. "You can accept guild missions, enter the dungeon to specified levels based on demonstrated capabilities, and legally defend yourself if necessary. But it comes with obligations," Royman added sternly. "Regular reporting of activities, compliance with guild regulations regarding monster management, and coordination with your sponsor Familia." "Sounds reasonable," Naruto agreed, examining the tablet. "So what now?" "Now," Loki declared, "we celebrate your official existence with lunch." I know just the place. Dash dash dash. The hostess of fertility was apparently one of Orario's most popular taverns, a multi-story wooden structure with a warm, inviting atmosphere despite the early hour. The catgirl waitress who greeted them practically bounced with excitement at seeing Loki. Goddess Loki, what an honor. Your usual private room. Yes, please, sir, Loki replied. And your finest ale. We're celebrating our new friend's introduction to Orario society. Quote, they were led upstairs to a comfortable room with a large table. Naruto found himself seated between Loki and Ace, with Finn and Riveria across from them. This is one of Orario's treasures, Loki explained as drinks arrived. Best food, best information, best atmosphere. Run by the formidable Mia Grand. Ah, speak of the devil. An imposing woman with pure ple hair entered carrying trays that seemed too heavy for her frame, yet she managed with ease. She set down platters of food that made Naruto's mouth water instantly. So this is your dimensional traveler, she said without preamble, assessing Naruto with sharp eyes. Word travels fast in this city, especially when Loki's involved. Mia Grand, Loki introduced, meet Naruto Uzumaki, officially. The most interesting person in Orario today. Naruto stood and offered his hand. Nice to meet you. Your place looks amazing. Mia's grip was surprisingly strong as she shook his hand. Just keep the property damage to a minimum. Unlike these troublemakers, she jerked her thumb toward Loki. First rounds on the house for interdimensional travelers. After that, you pay like everyone else. Naruto grinned. Fair enough. As Mia departed, the door opened again to admit a server carrying additional dishes. Naruto's attention immediately fixed on the newcomer, a slender elf with short mint green hair and piercing blue eyes. Unlike the bouncy catgirl downstairs, she moved with efficient grace, her expression professionally neutral. Yet something about her triggered Naruto's well-honed instincts. Beneath that serene exterior, he sensed a coiled readiness that reminded him of Anbu operatives, someone accustomed to violence, maintaining constant awareness of their surroundings while appearing perfectly ordinary. Their eyes met briefly as she set down plates. Something flashed across her features, recognition. Assessment. Before the professional mask returned. Thank you, Ryuu, Loki said cheerfully. Always a pleasure to be served by Lion. The pleasure is mine, Goddess Loki, the elf replied, her voice soft yet clear. Please enjoy your meal. As she turned to leave, Naruto noticed a subtle shift in her posture when passing behind Ace, the barest acknowledgement between warriors recognizing each other's capability. She's an adventurer, Naruto stated after the door closed, not a question. Loki's eyebrows rose. Former adventurer. How did you know? The way she moves. The awareness. The way she and Ace acknowledged each other. Naruto shrugged. I recognize fellow warriors. Perceptive, Finn commented, sampling the food. Ryuu Lion was indeed a formidable adventurer before circumstances changed her path. What circumstances? Naruto asked, curious. Not our story to tell. Riveria replied firmly. But yes, your instincts are correct. She was once among the strongest. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as they ate. Naruto's impressions of Orario, comparisons to his home. Cultural differences he'd noticed. The food was exceptional, rich and flavorful in ways that reminded him of Ichiraku's ramen while being entirely different. Throughout the meal, he noticed the mint-haired elf, Ryuu, returning periodically to refill drinks or bring additional dishes. Each time, he caught that same careful assessment in her gaze. Not hostile, but definitely interested. As they finished eating, Loki leaned back with a satisfied sigh. Now, business. You need accommodations, equipment, and income if you're staying in Orario for any length of time. I hadn't thought that far ahead, Naruto admitted. How much was that guild registration going to cost me? Consider it a diplomatic expense, Finn replied. But Loki raises valid points. You'll need sustainable arrangements beyond guest quarters at our manor. Loki tapped her chin thoughtfully. You could formally join my familia even without Falna. We have support members who don't enter the dungeon, but something tells me you value independence. Perceptive, Naruto echoed Finn's earlier comment. I appreciate the help, but yes, I'd prefer my own arrangements if possible. The guild maintains dormitories for independent adventurers, Riveria suggested. Basic accommodations, but affordable. Or, Loki said with a mischievous glance at Mia, who had returned to check on them, perhaps the hostess has an opening. You've had staff adventurers before, haven't you, Mia? The purple-haired proprietress narrowed her eyes. Playing matchmaker, Loki. Just solving multiple problems simultaneously. Loki replied innocently. Our friend needs accommodation and income. You're perpetually understaffed. He has excellent reflexes and combat awareness, useful for managing rowdy customers. And having a former adventurer on staff worked out wonderfully with Lion, didn't it? Mia studied Naruto with new intensity. Any tavern experience? None whatsoever, Naruto admitted. But I learn fast, and I'm stronger than I look. That part one believe, Mia acknowledged. We do have a small room available. Service in exchange for room and board, plus percentage of tips. It's not glamorous. Naruto considered the offer. A base of operations, regular income, and constant exposure to Orario's information networks through patron conversations. Strategically sound. I'd appreciate the opportunity, he said. Though I'll need some flexibility for dungeon exploration and research into my situation. Similar arrangement to Lion's, Mia nodded. Work when scheduled, clear absences in advance, no property damage. She fixed him with a stern look. And no bringing dungeon problems home to my establishment. Understood, Naruto agreed. When can I start? Tomorrow morning. Sir will show you the ropes. Mia extended her hand again. Welcome to the hostess of fertility, interdimensional traveler. As arrangements were finalized, Naruto caught sight of Ryuu watching from the doorway, her expression unreadable. Something told him that working alongside the former adventurer would prove more interesting than standard tavern duties. Naruto spent the afternoon with Finn, visiting various shops to acquire essentials, clothing, basic equipment, toiletries. The Loki Familia captain proved an efficient guide, steering him toward quality merchants who offered fair price. Rather than gouging the obvious newcomer. Consider it investment in a potential ally, Finn explained when Naruto expressed gratitude. Anyone who can fight alongside A's as an equal warrants cultivation. As evening approached, they returned to the hostess of fertility, where Sir showed Naruto to his new quarters, a small but clean room on the third floor, simply furnished with a bed, chest, small table, and chair. The staff facilities are down the hall, she explained cheerfully. Breakfast begins preparation at 5, lunch service starts at 11, dinner at 5 in the evening until midnight. Your shifts will rotate between meal periods. Got it, Naruto replied, setting down his few purchases. And the other staff, I've met you, Mia, and Ryuu so far. You'll meet everyone else tomorrow, Sir assured him. We're a friendly bunch, mostly. Even Ryuu, though she seems aloof at first. She's the other former adventurer, right? What's her story? Sir's expression sobered slightly. That's for her to share if she chooses. We all respect each other's privacy here. Naruto nodded, recognizing the boundary. Fair enough. I appreciate the opportunity. Rest well, Sir chirped, her cheer returning. Tomorrow will be busy. Left alone, Naruto opened his window to the cooling evening air. Orario spread before him, buildings catching the sunset's golden light, Babel Tower gleaming at the center. So different from Konoha's familiar silhouette, yet there was something comforting in the urban rhythm, people returning home, shops closing, taverns like this one coming to life. A soft knock interrupted his contemplation. Come in, he called, turning from the window. The door opened to reveal Ryuu, carrying a stack of folded clothes. Uniform, she explained, setting them on the table. Mia asked me to bring these. They should fit adequately. Thank you, Naruto replied, studying her more openly now. Up close, he confirmed his earlier impression, beneath the sei. Arver's demeanor lay a warrior's awareness. Her movements were too precise, her posture too balanced for someone who had only ever carried trays. She met his gaze directly. You were the one without Falna. Word travels fast, Naruto commented. In Orario, yes, she acknowledged. Particularly unusual developments. Naruto leaned against the windowsill. Does it bother you, having someone unusual working here? That depends, she replied carefully, on your intentions. Pretty simple ones, actually, Naruto said. Figure out how I got here, find a way home, and avoid causing problems. Are people who've helped me in the meantime. Ryu studied him silently, her blue eyes penetrating. Goddess Loki trusts you. I wouldn't go that far, Naruto smiled. She finds me interesting, which isn't the same thing. Perhaps, Ryu acknowledged with the faintest hint of a smile. Mia trusts my judgment regarding potential threats. I will be observing you. I'd be disappointed if you didn't, Naruto replied honestly. I'd do the same in your position. This seemed to surprise her slightly. Most would protest such surveillance. Naruto shrugged. I've nothing to hide, and I respect caution when it comes to protecting your home. Something in his tone must have resonated, because her posture relaxed marginally. The morning shift begins early. The kitchens can be chaotic for newcomers. I've faced worse than kitchens, Naruto grinned. We shall see, Ryu replied, and for a moment, Naruto could have sworn he saw amusement in her eyes. Rest well, Naruto Uzumaki. After she departed, Naruto created a shadow clone. Maintain sage mode, he instructed. I want to map the energy flows in this area overnight. The clone nodded, settling into meditation position while Naruto himself prepared for sleep. Mentally reviewing everything he'd learned. This world operated by different rules, yet certain fundamentals remained consistent. People sought strength, connections formed communities. Conflicts drove changes. Somewhere in this complex ecosystem of gods, monsters, and adventurers lay the answer to his displacement. Tomorrow would bring new information, new connections, new possibilities. His last thought before sleep claimed him was of blue eyes assessing him with cautious interest, not Mia's commanding gaze or Loki's mischievous scrutiny, but Ryu's careful evaluation. Something about her reminded him of himself, someone who had experienced loss but continued forward nonetheless. An interesting person in an interesting world. Dawn arrived with a cacophony of kitchen sounds, clattering pans, chopping knives, barked orders. Naruto awoke instantly alert, a lifetime of shinobi training allowing no gradual transition from sleep to wakefulness. His clone remained in meditation, orange pigmentation surrounding the eyes, but opened them at Naruto's movement. Report, Naruto said quietly. Significant natural energy flows beneath the building, the clone replied. Not just from the dungeon. There seem to be concentrated paths, almost like chakra channels in a body. This entire city sits on a network of them. That explains why Sage Mode feels different here, Naruto mused. Quickly dressing in the provided uniform, black pants, white shirt, green vest. Any unusual activity overnight? Several powerful energy signatures passed nearby, the clone confirmed. Different from human chakra. Denser, more concentrated. Gods, probably. One paused outside the building for several minutes around midnight. Freya, Naruto guessed, remembering the silver-haired goddess's interest. Can't confirm, but the energy felt, hungry. Possessive. Great. Naruto sighed. Maintain surveillance but stay hidden. Dispel if discovered. The clone nodded, shifting to a position near the window where it could observe without being easily spotted from outside. Naruto made his way downstairs, following the sounds and scents of breakfast preparation. The kitchen was indeed chaotic, a whirlwind of activity centered around a massive dwarf woman wielding multiple cooking implements simultaneously. You must be the dimensional traveler, she boomed upon noticing him. I'm Mei, head cook. Can you chop vegetables without removing fingers? I think I can manage, Naruto replied with a smile. Good, start with those potatoes. Sir will show you service duties after kitchen prep. For the next hour, Naruto chopped, carried, and assisted wherever directed. The work was straightforward compared to mission preparations, and he quickly found the rhythm of the kitchen's organized chaos. At precisely 6, the front doors opened for breakfast service. Sir appeared to collect Naruto, offering rapid-fire instructions on table arrangements, serving protocols, and customer management. Most morning customers are regulars, she explained. Adventurers heading to the dungeon, merchants opening shops, guild workers starting early shifts. Quick service, minimal conversation. Efficient turnover. The morning passed in a blur of activity. Naruto's natural dexterity and shadow clone experience with multitasking served him well, though he received occasional corrections from Mia or guidance from other staff members. Ryu worked with methodical efficiency, her movements precise and economical. Unlike Sir's cheerful chatter or Mei's boisterous commands. She communicated primarily through gesture and brief instruction. Yet Naruto noticed how the staff naturally aligned with her rhythm, suggesting a quiet authority built on competence rather than position. By mid-morning, the breakfast rush subsided. As Naruto wiped down tables, he became aware of a new presence, someone watching him from the entrance. He turned to find a small girl with white hair and red eyes standing in the doorway, staring with undisguised curiosity. "Hello," he greeted. "We're still open if you're looking for breakfast." The girl approached cautiously. "Are you the one without a Falna?" she asked directly. "Word really does travel fast," Naruto commented, setting aside his cloth. "I'm Naruto. And you are?" "Hestia," she replied. "Goddess Hestia." Naruto looked more carefully. Despite her diminutive stature and youthful appearance, he now recognized that same distinct energy signature he'd sensed from Loki and Freya, the concentrated, ancient aura of divinity. "Nice to meet you, Goddess Hestia," he said, offering a polite bow. "What brings you here this morning?" "You do," she replied bluntly. "Everyone's talking about the mysterious stranger who fights without divine blessing. I wanted to see for myself." "And what do you see?" Naruto asked, curious. Hestia circled him much as Loki had, though with less predatory intent and more scholarly interest. "Something different," she finally declared. "Your soul isn't like other mortals. There's something wild in it, untamed. And something else," she frowned. "Something ancient, sleeping beneath the surface." Kurama, Naruto realized. These gods could sense the nine tails even in his dormant state. "I'm a complicated person," he repeated his response to Freya. "Clearly," Hestia agreed, "but an interesting one. Are you planning to join a familia? Because if you're considering options." "Goddess Hestia," Ryu's voice interrupted smoothly as she approached with a pot of tea. "Welcome to the hostess of fertility. Would you care for refreshment?" Hestia pouted slightly at the interruption but nodded. "Tea would be lovely, thank you." As Ryu poured, she gave Naruto a significant glance. "Mia requests assistance with inventory when you've finished here." Naruto recognized the lifeline. "Of course, I'll be right there." To Hestia, he added, "Sorry, duty calls." "It was nice meeting you, Goddess Hestia." "This conversation isn't finished," Hestia called as he retreated. "I'll be back." In the storeroom, Naruto found not Mia but Ryu, checking wine bottles. "There's no inventory emergency, is there?" he asked knowingly. "No," she admitted without apology. "But the establishment has rules about staff being recruited during working hours." Naruto leaned against a shelf. Quote, "Was she trying to recruit me to her familia?" "Goddess Hestia heads the smallest familia in Orario," Ryu explained. "Currently just one member. She's eager to expand, and you rescued me from a recruitment pitch." "I intervened according to house policy," Ryu corrected, though Naruto caught the faintest hint of amusement in her tone. "Mia believes work hours are for working, not familia politics. I appreciate it either way," Naruto said. "Though I'm curious, why would a goddess with only one familia member be interested in someone who can't even receive Falna?" Ryu selected a bottle before answering. "Because in Orario, reputation and perceived strength matter. Association with someone unusual enhances status." "Politics," Naruto sighed. "Some things are universal across dimensions." "Indeed," Ryu agreed, actually offering a small smile. "Though Goddess Hestia is generally more sincere than most." "You know her well. Her familia member frequents the establishment," Ryu explained. "Bel Crenel, a novice adventurer with unusual potential." The name sounded familiar. "I think Loki's people mentioned him yesterday. White hair, red eyes like Hestia." Ryu nodded. "He's achieved remarkable growth in short time. Another anomaly in Orario's system. Maybe we'd get along," Naruto mused. "Anomalies united. Perhaps," Ryu allowed. "But first, actual inventory. These wines require rotation." Naruto grinned, accepting the deflection. "Yes, ma'am." They worked in companionable silence, Naruto following Ryu's efficient system for organizing the storeroom. He ticked how she occasionally tested his reflexes, tossing items for him to catch, assigning tasks requiring balance or coordination. Professional curiosity about his capabilities, he suspected, disguised as ordinary work. He responded by allowing just enough enhanced ability to be noticeable without being showy, catching bottles that should have been too fast to track, lifting crates that should have been too heavy for his frame. A subtle exchange of information through action rather than words. "You're adapting quickly," Ryuu observed as they finished. "To the work and to Orario. Adaptation is survival," Naruto replied. "Something I suspect you understand." Their eyes met in momentary recognition, two people who had learned that lesson through experience. The moment was interrupted by Sir's voice calling for assistance with the approaching lunch service. As they returned to the main floor, Naruto realized that for the first time since awakening in this world, he felt something approaching comfortable. Not home, not yet. But perhaps a starting point. The lunch rush brought new challenges. Unlike breakfast's efficient simplicity, the midday meal attracted diverse clientele. With complex orders and varying expectations, adventurers returning from morning dungeon expeditions arrived hungry and boisterous. Merchants conducted business over extended meals. Familias claimed entire sections for group gatherings. Naruto adapted, using subtle clones to observe other servers' techniques before dispelling them for the information. He noticed how Ryuu handled particularly difficult customers, not with Sir's cheerful deflection or Mei's intimidation, but with calm efficiency that somehow discouraged inappropriate behavior without explicit confrontation. As the rush subsided, leaving only scattered tables of lingering customers, the tavern doors burst open dramatically. A red-haired man with a flamboyant cape posed in the entrance, flanked by companions of varying species and appearances. "The Great Mord has returned," he announced to no one in particular. "Victorious as always." Several patrons groaned or rolled their eyes, suggesting this was a regular occurrence. At the bar, Mia merely raised an eyebrow before returning to her polishing. "Welcome to the hostess of fertility," Sir greeted with professional cheer. "Table for 5. As Sir led the loud group to a table, Naruto caught Ryuu watching with subtle tension in her posture. "Problem customers?" he asked quietly as they collected empty dishes from a nearby table. "Soma familia," Ryuu replied, her voice neutral but her eyes cold. Known for questionable tactics and disruptive behavior. Before Naruto could inquire further, a crash followed by angry shouting erupted from the newcomers' table. The red-haired man, Mord, had apparently knocked over his drink deliberately, and was now berating Sir for clumsiness. "Apologize properly, girl," he demanded, grabbing Sir's wrist. "Or compensate me another way." Naruto moved automatically, but Ryuu was faster. She appeared beside the table, pitcher in hand. "Your drink, sir," she said calmly, refilling his mug. "And please release my colleague." Something in her tone, perhaps the absolute lack of fear or intimidation, caused Mord to hesitate. His companions shifted uncomfortably. "The elf has claws," Mord sneered, but released Sir's wrist. "Still playing waitress, lion. How the mighty have fallen." Naruto, approaching with seeming casualness, caught the flicker of recognition among the group. They knew Ryuu's history, whatever it was, and were deliberately trying to provoke her. "Your meal will arrive shortly," Ryuu replied, utterly unmoved by the taunt. "Please enjoy your drinks." As Ryuu guided Sir away, Naruto positioned himself to intercept any further harassment. The group noticed his attention, Mord's eyes narrowing. "Fresh meat on staff," he called. "You look lost, Blondie. This isn't a job for real men." Naruto smiled pleasantly, channeling Kakashi-sensei's ability to seem simultaneously relaxed and dangerous. "Just enjoying the interesting customers. Some more interesting than others." Something in his tone or expression must have registered, because the group's demeanor shifted subtly. Bravado remained, but tempered with newfound wariness. "Whatever," Mord muttered, turning back to his companions. "This place gets worse every visit." From the bar, Mia caught Naruto's eye and gave an approving nod before returning to her duties. The remainder of the afternoon passed without incident. As the RN entered the lull between lunch and dinner service, Naruto found himself assigned to restocking duties with Ryuu. "Thanks for earlier," he said as they arranged clean glasses. "With Sir and those Soma guys." "No thanks necessary," Ryuu replied. "We protect our own here." "They seem to know you," Naruto observed carefully. "Outside of your server role." Ryuu's movements paused almost imperceptibly before continuing. "Many in Orario know of me from before. As an adventurer." "Yes." The single word carried finality, clearly closing that line of conversation. Naruto respected the boundary. Well, I'm glad you were there. Mia probably wouldn't appreciate me destroying the furniture on my first day. This earned a small but genuine smile. Indeed not. Though your restraint was noteworthy. Diplomatic, you mean. Unexpected, Ryuu clarified. From someone with your evident capabilities. I've learned restraint the hard way, Naruto admitted. Power without control just creates more problems. Ryuu studied him with new interest. A philosophy not commonly embraced in Orario. Is that why you left adventuring? Naruto asked, then immediately raised a hand. Sorry, boundary crossed. Ignore that. To his surprise, Ryuu didn't immediately shut down the conversation. No, my circumstances were different. She arranged glasses with methodical precision. But your insight is not entirely misplaced. Power and its application have consequences. Not all adventurers consider this sufficiently. Before Naruto could respond, Sir appeared in the doorway. Naruto, you have visitors. Loki Familia. In the main hall, Naruto found Finn, Riveria, and unexpectedly, Ace Wallenstein. Checking on my tavern skills already? Naruto asked with a smile. Actually, we have a proposition, Finn replied. The guild has authorized an exploratory mission to the floor where you were discovered. Given your unique connection to the location, they've specifically requested your participation. As official guild specialist, Riveria added. Compensated accordingly. When? Tomorrow, Ace answered. Early departure. Naruto considered the opportunity. Returning to H's arrival point might yield clues about the dimensional displacement. Working with experienced dungeon explorers would provide valuable insights into this world's power structures. And the guild affiliation would strengthen his legitimate standing in Orario. I'll need to clear it with Mia, he said. Already done, Finn smiled. She's agreed to release you for guild assignments provided adequate notice. We'll handle the formal request paperwork. Then I'm in, Naruto decided. What should I prepare? They discussed equipment requirements, meeting arrangements, and expedition protocols. Throughout the conversation, Naruto noticed Ace watching him with that same analytical intensity she displayed during their first encounter. Not hostile, but deeply curious. As the Loki Familia members prepared to leave, Naruto found himself walking alongside Ace toward the door. Something on your mind? He asked directly. She considered her response carefully. Your fighting style, she finally said. It's unlike anything in Orario. I would like to understand it better. You want to spar sometime, Naruto translated with a smile. Ace nodded, a flash of genuine interest breaking through her reserved demeanor. Yes, I'd like that too, Naruto admitted. Always good to test techniques against different approaches. After tomorrow's expedition, Ace suggested. Training grounds at Loki Familia Manor. It's a date, Naruto replied automatically, then winced at his poor word choice. I mean, an arrangement. A plan. For the first time, he saw Ace smile, just a tiny upward curl of her lips. But somehow transforming her entire demeanor. A plan, she agreed. After they departed, Naruto returned to his duties with renewed purpose. Tomorrow would bring his first organized expedition into the dungeon, and perhaps answers about his arrival in this world. The remainder of his shift passed quickly. As evening customers began arriving, Naruto found himself managing tables with increasing confidence. Navigating the complex social dynamics of Orario's diverse population, he observed how different familia interacted, noted political undercurrents in seemingly casual conversations, cataloged information about dungeon activities and monster behaviors. The tavern hummed with life and information, exactly as Loki had promised. A perfect base for understanding this new world. Late in the evening, as the crowd thinned toward closing time, the door opened to admit a young white-haired boy accompanied by a diminutive figure Naruto recognized from that morning. Goddess Hestia, he acknowledged with a bow as they entered. And you must be Belle Crenelle. The boy looked startled at being recognized. Why yes. How did you know? Ryuu mentioned you, Naruto explained, guiding them to an available table. Said you were a regular. He practically lives here some days, Hestia grumbled good-naturedly. Something about watching a certain elf. Oof. Belle had apparently stepped on her foot. His face flushing crimson. Gee goddess. Please. Naruto hid his amusement. What can I get you this evening? After taking their orders, Naruto found Ryuu nearby, ostensibly AR. Ranging table settings but clearly aware of the new arrivals. Your admirer is here, Naruto commented quietly. Ryu's expression didn't change, but her ears twitched slightly, an elvish tell, he suspected. Belle Crenelle is a valued patron. She replied neutrally. With excellent taste in servers, Naruto added with a grin. The faintest pink touched Ryu's cheeks. Your observations exceed your mandate, she said primly. But without genuine annoyance. The kitchen requires these orders delivered. Throughout the evening, Naruto noticed Belle's awkward glances toward Ryuu, and her subtle awareness of his presence despite her professional demeanor. An interesting dynamic, suggesting that despite her reserved exterior, Ryuu maintained meaningful connections in her new life. As closing time approached, Naruto found himself cleaning tables alongside Sir, who hummed contentedly as she worked. You did well for your first day, she commented. Customers liked you, even managed more without bloodshed. Low bar for success, Naruto laughed. Lower than you think, Sir replied with surprising seriousness. The last new hire quit after Mord's group reduced him to tears. Their loss is your gain, I guess, Naruto said. Stacking plates. Our gain, Sir corrected. The hostess is a family of sorts. Odd and mismatched, but family nonetheless. The sentiment struck Naruto unexpectedly. Family had always been complicated for him, born without, building surrogate versions through determination and shared struggle. The casual inclusion in this new family, after just one day, felt both strange and welcome. As the last customers departed and final cleaning commenced, Mia approached Naruto with her characteristic directness. You'll be going to the dungeon tomorrow, she stated. With Loki's people, yes, Naruto confirmed. Guild assignment to investigate where I first appeared. Should help understand how I got here. Mia nodded. Good. But remember, dungeon business stays in the dungeon. No bringing troubles back here. Understood, Naruto assured her. And take Lion with you. This unexpected addition caught Naruto off guard. Ryuu. Why? Because I said so, Mia replied firmly. She knows the dungeon, knows Loki's people, knows you're still finding your feet in Orario. Makes sense. Before Naruto could respond, Ryuu herself approached, having evidently overheard. Mia, that's unnecessary. I have duties here. Duties I'm releasing you from, Mia countered. You've been cooped up too long. Expedition will do you good. Her tone softened slightly, and, I'll sleep better knowing someone I trust is watching our interdimensional investment. Ryuu opened her mouth as if to protest further, then closed it, resignation crossing her features. As you wish, Naruto looked between them, sensing undercurrents he didn't fully understand. I'd welcome the company, he offered sincerely. If you're willing. Ryuu met his gaze, something complex flickering behind her eyes. I will prepare appropriately, she finally said. What time do we depart? Dawn. Meeting at Babel Tower entrance. She nodded once. I will be ready. With that, she turned and resumed her closing duties. Mia watched her go with an expression Naruto couldn't quite interpret, concern mixed with determination, perhaps. Take care of each other down there, she said simply before returning to the bar. Later, as Naruto prepared for sleep, he dispelled his surveillance clone and created a new one to continue mapping energy patterns overnight. The day's experiences swirled in his mind, new connections formed, information gathered, context beginning to solidify around this strange world's functioning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, returning to the dungeon with purpose rather than confusion. And perhaps, he reflected as sleep approached, new insights into the reserved former adventurer who would accompany him. His last thought before consciousness faded was a simple realization. Despite the strangeness of his situation, despite the uncertainty of his path home, he was not alone in this world. It wasn't Konoha, but for now, it would do. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Fox and Lion. Dawn painted Orario in gold and amber, the first rays of sunlight reflecting off Babel Tower's white stone surface like a beacon. Naruto stood at the meeting point, dressed in his paired orange and black attire rather than the tavern uniform. The familiar weight of his equipment pouches and headband provided a comforting connection to home. He'd risen before the household, leaving only a note for Mia explaining his departure. His shadow clone had dispelled during the night, transferring knowledge of energy patterns it had mapped, confirming his suspicion that natural energy flowed differently in this world. Following channels that converged beneath Babel Tower like rivers joining at a massive delta. A soft footfall behind him broke his contemplation. He turned to find Ryuu approaching, and momentarily failed to mask his surprise. Gone was the tavern waitress. In her place stood a warrior. Ryuu wore close-fitting leather armor over a blue-white bodysuit, light Ow for mobility but strategically reinforced at vital points. A short cape draped from one shoulder, and a sword hung at her hip with the casual confidence of someone who considered the weapon an extension of themselves. Most striking was her demeanor. The reserved efficiency remained, but now aligned with an unmistakable readiness that reminded Naruto of elite Jonin preparing for high-risk missions. "You're staring," she observed neutrally. "Sorry," Naruto replied with a sheepish grin. "It's just different seeing you in your element." "This was my element," Ryuu corrected. Past tense. Before Naruto could respond, the remainder of their expedition party arrived, Finn leading, followed by Aiz, Chiona, and several low-key familia members Naruto remembered from his rescue: Bet, Chiona's more serious sister, and Lefia, a young elf mage who regarded Ryuu with poorly disguised admiration. "Good morning," Chiona called cheerfully, bouncing on her toes despite the early hour. "Ready for adventure, Whisker Face?" "Born ready," Naruto replied with matching enthusiasm. "Morning, everyone." Finn nodded in greeting, then noted Ryuu's presence with interest. "Lion joins us. Unexpected but welcome. Your experience will be valuable." "Mia's orders," Ryuu explained simply. "Smart woman," Finn acknowledged. "Our objective is the area where we encountered Naruto, to investigate for dimensional anomalies. The guild has authorized exclusive access to that section for today's expedition." "Any specific protocols for the investigation?" Naruto asked. "The guild provided detection equipment." Finn gestured to packs carried by support members. "And Lefia will be performing magical analysis. Beyond that, we're looking for anything unusual, energy disturbances, physical anomalies, monster behavior changes." "I can help with energy detection," Naruto offered. "Sage mode allows me to sense natural energy flows." This caught Aiz's attention. "You mentioned this ability before. How does it function?" "I gather natural energy and balance it with my own chakra," Naruto explained. "It enhances physical abilities but also extends sensory range dramatically. I can detect disturbances in natural energy from considerable distance." "Demonstrate," Aiz requested. Not a command, but the simple directness he was coming to associate with her communication style. Naruto nodded, forming a hand seal to focus. He'd been practicing with this world's natural energy since arriving, adjusting to its wilder, less structured flow. He closed his eyes briefly, drawing it in, feeling familiar transformation as orange pigmentation surrounded his eyes. When he opened them again, now golden with horizontal pupils, he heard several gasps. The world had transformed to his perceptio. Energy flows visible as currents of light, living beings glowing with their internal power, the massive concentration beneath Babel Tower pulsing like a heart. "Your eyes changed," Chiona exclaimed, leaning forward to examine his face. "They look like a frog's." "Toad," Naruto corrected automatically. Side effect of Sage mode. Lefia approached cautiously, her mage's senses clearly detecting something unusual. "This isn't magic as we understand it," she observed. "There's no spell structure, no chant residue. It's more like, you've become a conduit." "That's actually pretty accurate," Naruto acknowledged. "I'm channeling energy that exists naturally in the environment." Finn studied him with increased interest. "Can you maintain this state while we descend?" "For limited periods," Naruto replied. "It requires concentration, and this world's energy behaves differently than I'm accustomed to." "More wild, interesting choice of word," Finn mused. "Let's proceed." Maintain normal formation. With Naruto and Lion in special observation roles, the expedition entered Babel Tower, passing through the guild checkpoint with pre-arranged authorization. Naruto noticed how other adventurers regarded the Loki Familia group with a mixture of respect, envy, and in some cases, barely concealed hostility. Status clearly mattered in Orario's ecosystem. As they descended through upper floors, Naruto observed the dungeon with new awareness. What had been confusion during his first awakening now became systematic analysis, noting monster spawn patterns, architectural features, energy concentrations. He maintained Sage mode intermittently, conserving strength while establishing baseline readings of normal dungeon energy flow. "What exactly are we looking for?" he asked Ryuu as they traversed a wide corridor on the 15th floor. "Dimensional breaches would manifest as irregularities in the dungeon's structure," she explained quietly. "Areas where walls seem thinner, where monster patterns deviate, where the dungeon itself seems to resist inspection. You sound like you've encountered something similar before." Ryu's expression remained neutral, but her eyes revealed consideration. "The dungeon contains many anomalies. Some documented, others merely rumored. Spatial distortions occasionally occur in deeper floors. But not usually where I was found." "No," she confirmed. "That area is well mapped. Standard monster populations, predictable geography. Your appearance was unprecedented." They continued deeper, passing through floor after floor with methodical efficiency. Naruto was impressed by the low-key familia's coordination. They functioned as a single organism, each member fulfilling their role without needless communication. Even more interesting was how they naturally incorporated Ryuu into their patterns despite her long absence from adventuring, suggesting previous experience working together. When monsters appeared, increasingly frequent and aggressive as they descended, the party dispatched them with practiced ease. Naruto contributed selectively, studying the others' fighting styles while revealing his own capabilities sparingly. Ace fought with breathtaking precision, each movement exactly as needed, neither excessive nor insufficient. Finn employed cunning and positioning rather than brute force, his small stature belying devastating effectiveness. The twins, Chiona and Tion, complemented each other perfectly, their contrasting weapons creating defensive gaps that never aligned. Bet relied on overwhelming speed and power, while Lefia provided magical support from protected positions. And Ryuu moved like shadow given form. Where Ace was precision, Ryuu was fluidity, adapting instantaneously to changing conditions. Anticipating rather than reacting, her sword technique showed hints of elvish tradition filtered through hard-earned practicality. Most telling was her awareness. She never seemed surprised, never unprepared. During a brief rest period at a safe zone on the 20th floor, Naruto found himself seated beside Ryuu as they shared water from their supplies. "You're holding back," she observed quietly. Not accusation but simple statement. "So are you," Naruto replied with equal directness. Their eyes met in mutual recognition. Neither bothered denying the assessment. "Unfamiliar environment," Naruto explained after a moment. "Better to understand before committing fully." Ryuu nodded slightly. "Prudent. Plus," Naruto added with a small smile, "always good to keep a few surprises in reserve." Something flickered across Ryu's features, not quite amusement, but perhaps appreciation of the sentiment. Indeed, before they could continue, Finn signaled resumption of their descent. The 24th floor, where Naruto had first been discovered, lay just ahead. As they approached the area, Naruto activated Sage mode again, extending his senses to maximum range. Immediately, he detected something unusual, a disturbance in the natural energy flow, like ripples in a pond that hadn't quite settled. "There's something ahead," he reported. "Not active currently, but residual disruption in the energy field." Like an echo, Finn nodded. "Lefia, begin magical analysis. Everyone else, secure perimeter. Naruto, guide us to the exact location." Naruto led them through NGLY familiar passages until reaching the chamber where he'd first awakened. Nothing visibly distinguished it from dozens of similar caverns they'd passed, yet his sage senses detected subtle difference. Microscopic fractures in reality itself, healing but not yet whole. "Here," he indicated, kneeling to touch the stone floor. "The disturbance is strongest at this point." Lefia began a complex incantation, her staff glowing with arcane symbols. Guild specialists unpacked equipment, crystalline devices that hummed when activated, recording instruments, sample collection tools. As Naruto concentrated on the residual energy pattern, something unexpected happened. His connection to Kurama, muted since arriving in this world, suddenly strengthened. The familiar presence of the Nine Tails stirred in his consciousness. "About time you found this place again." The fox's voice rumbled through his mind, fainter than normal but unmistakable. Kurama, you're awake. Naruto responded silently, careful not to show external reaction. Barely, came the grumbled reply. This world's energy interferes with our connection. But here, where you crossed over, the boundary remains thinner. Do you know what happened? How we got here? Something pulled us through deliberately, Kurama stated. No accident. I sensed intention, purpose. Someone brought me here specifically. Who? Why? Unknown. The fox admitted. The transition damaged our connection. But the energy signature remains. Familiar somehow. Yet, not. The communication faded as Kurama's presence receded. The connection weakening again as they moved beyond the precise transition point. Naruto. Aiza's voice broke through his internal dialogue. You detected something. He blinked, realizing he'd been motionless for nearly a minute. Yes, but it's fading now. The dimensional breach was definitely here, but it's healing itself naturally. Lefia approached, her incantation complete. My analysis confirms. There was a significant distortion of dungeon energy at this location, but it's rapidly normalizing. Within days, perhaps hours, no trace will remain. Can you determine anything about the other side? Finn questioned. Where our guest originated? The young mage shook her head. The magical signature is unlike anything in guild records. Whatever caused this breach used Crinchi. Plus outside our established understanding. Not helpful for finding my way home, Naruto observed, unable to completely mask his disappointment. Perhaps not directly, Finn acknowledged. But it confirms this wasn't random. Something or someone deliberately created this breach at this specific location. Agreeing with my own information, Naruto admitted, deciding to share partially. I was able to briefly connect with a companion from my world. They sensed purpose in the transition. This revelation generated significant interest, particularly from A's. You maintain a connection to your world? She asked, golden eyes intense. Not consistently, Naruto clarified. It's complicated. Before further questions could follow, a distant rumbling interrupted the investigation. The floor trembled slightly, dust drifting from the ceiling. That's not normal, Bet growled, ears twitching alertly. Monster Rex activity, Chion suggested, hands moving to her weapons. Finn shook his head. Wrong pattern for Goliath. This feels different. Naruto extended his sage senses again, probing the disturbance. What he found alarmed him. Something's coming. Multiple entities, moving fast. And they're targeting this location specifically. Impossible, one of the guild specialists protested. Monsters respond to adventurer presence, not geographical features. These ones are different, Naruto insisted. Already moving toward the chamber entrance. They're converging here deliberately. As if confirming his assessment, a chorus of roars echoed through the tunnels, cl. Closer than expected and approaching rapidly from multiple directions. Defensive formation, Finn commanded instantly. Protect the specialists. Naruto, A's, front line. Lefia, barrier spells. Lion, rear guard. They assumed positions with practiced efficiency, weapons ready just as the first monsters appeared. Not the standard variants Naruto had observed throughout their descent, but something different. These creatures moved with unnatural coordination, their eyes glowing with intelligence beyond typical dungeon spawn. Most concerning was their appearance, obsidian skin laced with pulsing orange energy patterns that reminded Naruto uncomfortably of Sage Chakra. These are new, Chiona commented, twirling her massive blade. Never seen monsters with glowy veins before. They're reacting to the dimensional energy. Lefia realized aloud, somehow feeding on it. The monsters attacked with coordinated precision. Unlike the straightforward aggression of normal dungeon creatures, these employed tactics, feints, flanking attempts, focused targeting of spellcasters. Naruto found himself defending Lefia from 3 attackers simultaneously, impressed despite the circumstances by their adaptation to his counters. They're learning, he called to Finn. Adjusting to our techniques. Impossible, the guild specialist shouted from behind their defensive line. Monsters cannot. His protest ended abruptly as one creature broke through, moving with impossible speed to strike him down before anyone could intervene. The remaining specialists huddled behind Ryuu, who dispatched attackers with mechanical precision. Her blade a silver blur. Aiz fought beside Naruto, her sword cutting through monsters with devastating efficiency. They target knowledge, she observed, nodding toward the fallen specialist. Prioritizing those studying the anomaly. Naruto created shadow clones to reinforce vulnerable positions, noting how the monsters instantly adapted, focusing fire to dispel duplicates. Identifying the original through subtle cues. Their intelligence far exceeded anything he'd encountered in the dungeon so far. We need to retreat, Finn decided, assessing the deteriorating situation. Secure the collected data and fall back to the 20th floor safe point. They'll pursue, Naruto warned. They want to prevent investigation of the breach. Then we create distance, Finn replied. Lefia. The mage nodded, understanding the unspoken command. She began a complex incantation, longer and more elaborate than her previous spells. The air around her shimmered with gathering power. Cover her for 30 seconds, Finn ordered. Then prepare to move. The party tightened formation around Lefia, repelling increasingly coordinated attacks. Naruto found himself fighting back-to-back with Ryuu. Their movements unconsciously synchronizing as they defended the vulnerable position. On your left, she warned, her voice calm despite the chaos. Naruto spun instantly, driving a Rasengan through the charging monster while Ryuu eliminated two more approaching from the right. There was something almost familiar in their coordination, reminiscent of his team's work with Sasuke during their final battles together, that instinctive understanding that transcended conscious communication. Lefia's voice rose in crescendo, magical energy swirling around her like a tempest. As the final words left her lips, blinding light erupted outward, forming a barrier that pushed the monsters back with tremendous force. Many disintegrated instantly, while others were flew-ing against cavern walls with bone-crushing impact. Now, Finn commanded, retreat pattern Delta. The party moved with coordinated precision, the twins taking point while Bet and Aiz guarded the flanks. Naruto created shadow clones to cover their retreat, each duplicate employing different techniques to confuse pursuers. As they withdrew through the tunnels, Ryuu fell into step beside Naruto, matching his pace effortlessly. Those weren't normal monsters, she observed quietly. No, Naruto agreed. They responded to the dimensional disturbance. Almost like antibodies attacking a foreign intrusion. Ryuu glanced at him sharply. You believe the dungeon itself is reacting to your presence. Or to whatever brought me here, Naruto clarified. Either way, it confirms this wasn't a natural occurrence. They reached the 20th floor without further incident, the specialized monsters apparently unwilling to pursue beyond the breach's immediate vicinity. In the relative safety of the pantry, a designated rest area within the dungeon, the party regrouped to assess their findings and tend injuries. The surviving guild specialists huddled together, reviewing data collected before the attack while mourning their fallen colleague. Finn and Lefia consulted over magical readings, their expressions grave. Naruto found a quiet corner to attempt re-establishing connection with Kurama. But the fox remained silent, their brief communication evidently exhausting the fragile link. With a sigh, he opened his eyes to find Aiz standing before him, observing with that same intense curiosity. Your abilities, she began without preamble, they adapted during combat. I adjust to circumstances, Naruto replied with a shrug. No, Aiz shook her head slightly. Your energy signature changed, multiple times, as if, shifting forms. Naruto realized she must have detected his unconscious drawing on Kurama's chakra during intense moments of the battle, a habit so ingrained he so many times did it without deliberate thought. I have multiple energy sources available, he explained carefully. Different situations call for different approaches. Teach me, Aiz requested suddenly. What? Your methods, she clarified. The way you sense energy. Adapt to it. I want to learn. Her directness caught Naruto off guard. It's not something easily taught, he explained. The techniques from my world rely on a lifetime of specific training, different chakra pathways. Try, she interrupted, golden eyes unwavering. After we return, as agreed, Naruto remembered their arrangement to spar. I can show you some basics, he conceded. But I can't promise results. She nodded once, apparently satisfied, and returned to her duties without further comment. Across the room, Naruto noticed Ryuu watching their interaction with subtle attention while maintaining her guard position. When their eyes met briefly, she didn't look away, merely acknowledging his awareness with the slightest inclination of her head. After sufficient rest and reorganization, the expedition began its ascent toward the surface. The return journey proceeded efficiently, with only standard monst. Our encounters easily managed by the experienced party. Throughout the ascent, Naruto periodically activated Sage Mode to check for unusual energy signatures or pursuit, but detected nothing beyond normal dungeon patterns. They emerged into late afternoon sunlight, the expedition having taken most of the day. Guild officials waited at the entrance to receive their reports and collected data, expras. Sing condolences for the lost specialist while eagerly examining the findings. The investigation continues, Finn informed Naruto as guild representatives departed with the materials. They'll analyze everything collected and search their archives for similar incidents. Not very encouraging for finding my way home, Naruto observed. Perhaps not immediately, Finn acknowledged. But understood. The mechanism of your arrival is the first step toward potential return. The Loki Familia members began dispersing, returning to their manor to report to their goddess. Aze lingered briefly. Tomorrow, she stated. Training grounds. Mid-morning. I'll be there, Naruto confirmed. With a nod of acknowledgement to both Naruto and Ryuu, she departed, leaving them standing alone before Babel Tower as evening approached. Well, Naruto said, stretching tired muscles, that was educational, if not entirely successful. Investigation rarely yields immediate answers, Ryuu replied pragmatically. The guild will continue analyzing the data. True, Naruto acknowledged. Though I'm more concerned about those specialized monsters. They seemed specifically designed to counter dimensional investigation. A defensive mechanism, Ryuu suggested, or deliberate interference. Either way, not encouraging. They began walking toward the hostess of fertility, transitioning from the Babel Tower Plaza to Orario's main thoroughfare. The streets bustled with adventurers returning from the dungeon, merchants closing shops, citizens heading home or toward evening entertainment. Your performance was impressive, Ryuu commented after several minutes of comfortable silence. Your adaptability in particular. Coming from someone so reserved, Naruto recognized the statement as significant praise. Thanks. You were pretty amazing yourself. Been a while since you adventured, but it didn't show. Some skills remain regardless of disuse, she replied, though Naruto detected a hint of appreciation beneath her neutral tone. The way you moved, he continued, reminds me of shinobi from my world. Economy of motion, constant awareness, reading the battlefield instinctively. Ryuu considered this comparison. Your shinobi sound similar to adventurers in methodology, if not organization. Similar but different, Naruto agreed. Adventurers here seek personal growth and wealth from what I've seen. Shinobi serve their village first. Protection, missions, maintaining balance between nations. A more structured purpose, Ryuu observed. Usually, Naruto acknowledged with a wry smile. Though I've never been great at following structures. This elicited the faintest curve of Ryu's lips, not quite a smile, but progress nonetheless. That, I can believe. As they turned onto a side street, Naruto sensed a sudden change in the atmosphere, subtle but unmistakable. His instinct sparked alert moments before Ryuu also tensed, her hand moving casually to rest near her sword hilt. We're being followed, she stated quietly. 5 of them, Naruto confirmed, sage senses extending without visible change in his demeanor. Rooftop to the right, alley entrance behind us, shop doorway ahead. 2 moving parallel on the adjacent street. Ryu's eyes widened slightly, impressed by the precision of his awareness. You can detect all that without obvious observation. Sage mode, he explained. I'm maintaining a minimal connection, just enough for sensory enhancement. Evade or confront, she asked practically. Naruto considered the options. Let's see what they want first. Could be simple curiosity after today's expedition. They continued walking at unchanged pace, though both were now hyper-aware of their surroundings. When they reached a small plaza with a fountain, more open ground with multiple exit routes, they paused as if admiring the view, effectively forcing their followers to either reveal themselves or abandon pursuit. After a moment's hesitation, 3 figures emerged from different approaches, adventurers based on their equipment, wearing matching insignias Naruto didn't recognize. Naruto Uzumaki, called the apparent leader, a tall Huma-en with elaborate armor and a massive hammer strapped to his back. The adventurer without Falna, we would speak with you. You have my attention, Naruto replied casually, turning to face them while maintaining awareness of the two followers who remained hidden. Though I usually prefer introductions that don't involve surveillance. The leader smiled thinly. Cautious approach is prudent when dealing with unknowns. I am Xanis Lustra, captain of Aikilo's Familia. My goddess has expressed interest in your unique circumstances. Word travels fast in Orario, Naruto observed. Information is valuable currency, Xanis agreed. And you, outsider, represent a potentially valuable commodity. I'm not a commodity, Naruto stated flatly, his tone cooling. Perhaps, resource, is more palatable terminology. Xanis adjusted smoothly. Regardless, Goddess Aikilos believes your abilities could be mutually beneficial to explore. She extends an invitation to meet. Aikilo's Familia specialize in dream manipulation and illusion magic, Ryuu stated quietly. They rarely recruit directly. Xanis's eyes narrowed at Ryuu. The fallen lion, your reputation precedes you as well. I'm surprised to find you involved with our interdimensional visitor. Professional association, Ryuu replied neutrally, though Naruto detected subtle tension in her posture. Of course, Xanis smiled without warmth. Well, Naruto Uzumaki, what say you to my goddess's invitation? She can offer insights into dimensional travel that others in Orario cannot. Perhaps even assistance with your displacement situation. The offer was tempting. Any potential lead on returning home warranted investigation, but Naruto's instincts warned caution. Something in Xanis's demeanor suggested ulterior motives beyond simple recruitment. Please thank your goddess for her interest, Naruto replied diplomatically. Once I've settled some current obligations, I'd be happy to arrange a proper meeting. Disappointment flashed across Xanis's features before his diplomatic mask returned. Of course, time to consider is reasonable. We shall extend the invitation again soon. He produced a small crystal and placed it on the fountain edge. Should you reconsider sooner, this communication stone will connect you directly. With a formal bow that somehow managed to convey insincerity, Xanis and his visible companions withdrew. Naruto's senses tracked the hidden followers breaking off as well, converging with the main group several streets away. That was interesting, Naruto commented once they were truly alone. Concerning, Ryuu corrected, her expression grim. Aikilo's Familia rarely involves themselves directly in Orario politics. Their interest suggests deeper implications to your arrival than mere curiosity. You don't trust them. I trust few in Orario, Ryuu replied frankly. But Aikilo's particularly has, concerning associations. Naruto pocketed the communication crystal. Good to know. IW. Isn't planning to rush into any alliance anyway. They resumed their walk toward the hostess of fertility, both more alert now for additional observation. Naruto noted how naturally they had worked together during the confrontation. Ryuu providing context to his observations, he extending his sensory capabilities for their mutual benefit. Despite their brief acquaintance, a functional partnership had formed with surprising ease. You've made quite an impression in short time, Ryuu observed as they neared the tavern. First Loki, then Freya, now Aikilos. 3 major familia interested within days of your arrival. Lucky me, Naruto replied dryly. Is it always like this in Orario? Everyone recruiting for their teams. Familia constantly compete for advantage, Ryuu explained. New Abel, idis or knowledge represent potential shifts in established power balances. Your capabilities, functioning without Falna, represent a significant unknown factor. Making me a target for recruitment or elimination, Naruto concluded. Yes, Ryuu confirmed bluntly. Though elimination seems unlikely given the interest level, your value as an ally currently outweighs your threat potential. Comforting, Naruto muttered. They reached the hostess of fertility just as evening customers began arriving in force. The transition from dungeon exploration to tavern service felt almost surreal. Minutes ago they'd been discussing potential threats, now they would be serving drinks and food. Mia greeted them at the service entrance, her sharp eyes assessing them for injuries. Everyone intact, she demanded. We're fine, Naruto assured her. Though it was eventful. Good. Get changed and help with dinner service. Save the details for closing. The evening shift passed in controlled chaos. Naruto found the physical work almost refreshing after the mental tension of the expedition and subsequent encounter. He fell easily into the rhythm established during his first day, though now with better understanding of the tavern's patterns and customer expectations. Throughout the evening, he noticed Ryuu had fully reassumed her waitress persona, the warrior completely concealed beneath professional efficiency. Only occasional moments revealed their shared experience, a glance of mutual understanding when Aikilo's familia members entered briefly, coordinated movement when navigating crowded spaces. The unspoken awareness that came from having faced danger together. As closing time approached and customers thinned, Belcranel and Goddess Hestia made their now familiar appearance, taking a corner table. Naruto noticed how Ryu's awareness shifted subtly upon their arrival, not obvious enough for casual observation, but clear to his trained perception. When Sir nudged him to take their table, Naruto raised an eyebrow questioningly. Ryu always serves Bell, Sir explained with a mischievous smile. It's tradition. Sure enough, Ryu appeared beside him, smoothly taking the order form from his hand. I'll handle table 7, she stated, not quite a request. Of course, Naruto agreed, fighting back a smile at this small revelation of personal preference from the otherwise strictly professional elf. As Ryu approached their table, Naruto noticed how Bell straightened unconsciously, his entire demeanor brightening. The boy's crush was obvious to anyone paying attention. Huff Hestia's pout suggested she was less than thrilled by her familia member's infatuation. Later, as they completed closing duties, Mia gathered the staff in the now empty main room. All right, she declared, let's hear what happened in the dungeon today. Guild messengers have been buzzing around Orario all evening with rumors. Naruto and Ryu provided a concise summary of the expedition, the unusual monsters, and the subsequent approach by Aikilo's familia. The staff listened with varying reactions: concern, fascination, professional interest in potential impacts on business. So the Guild confirmed you're from another dimension, May summarized, but has no idea how to send you back. And now 3 major familia want to recruit you for your weird frog powers. Toad, Naruto corrected automatically, then smiled at her deliberate provocation. And yes, that's about the situation. The specialized monsters are more concerning than the recruitment attempts, Ryu added. Their targeted response to the dimensional investigation suggests intelligent direction. Mia nodded gravely. Keep your guard up, both of you. Orario politics are dangerous enough without interdimensional complications. She turned to Naruto. You're scheduled off tomorrow morning for your training with the Sword Princess, but I expect you back for evening service. Yes, ma'am, Naruto agreed readily. As the staff dispersed to their quarters, Naruto found himself walking alongside Ryu up the stairs. The day's shared experiences had shifted something between them, not dramatic, but a subtle change in the quality of silence they shared. Thank you, he said as they reached the landing where their paths would diverge. For coming today. Your knowledge was valuable. Ryu considered him for a moment before responding. You would have managed regardless. Probably, Naruto acknowledged with a small smile. But it was better having someone watching my back that I trusted. Something flickered in her eyes at the word trusted. Surprise, perhaps, or an emotion more complex. Rest well, she said finally. The Sword Princess will not hold back tomorrow. Looking forward to it, Naruto replied honestly. New techniques, different approaches, it's how we grow. Indeed, Ryu agreed, and for the first time, offered a genuine if small smile. Good night, Naruto. As Naruto prepared for sleep, he created another surveillance clone to continue mapping energy patterns. His mind reviewed the day's discoveries, confirmation of deliberate dimensional transport, specialized monsters guarding the breach site. Multiple familia interest in his abilities. Progress, even if not the immediate solution he might have hoped for. And something else, a growing connection to this world through its inhabitants. Particularly a certain reserved elf who had fought at his side with surprising synchronicity. Sleep came easily despite the day's exertions, his dreams filled with images of 2 worlds gradually merging into one. Morning found Naruto at the Loki Familia Manor training grounds, an impressive facility with various combat areas, obstacle courses, and specialized equipment. Ace waited in a central sparring ring, performing fluid warm-up exercises with her practice sword. "You came," she stated as he approached, neither surprised nor questioning. "Said I would," Naruto replied simply, stretching his shoulders. "How do you want to approach this?" "Observation first," Ace decided. "Show me your standard techniques without sage enhancement." Naruto nodded, creating a shadow clone as demonstration partner. For the next 15 minutes, he performed a routine of taijutsu forms, basic ninjutsu applications, and weapon techniques while Ace observed with intense focus. "Your foundation is different," she noted when he finished. "Not built on Falna development principles. More integrated movement patterns. Shinobi training starts young," Naruto explained. "We develop all aspects simultaneously rather than focusing on stat categories." Ace nodded thoughtfully. "Show Sage mode now." Naruto gathered natural energy, allowing the transformation to manifest fully. The orange pigmentation appeared around his eyes, which shifted to golden with horizontal pupils. "Now spar," Ace requested, raising her practice sword. "Don't hold back significantly." What followed? Was the most educational exchange of techniques Naruto had experienced since arriving in this world. Ace moved with incredible precision and speed, not quite matching his sage-enhanced capabilities, but compensating through perfect economy of motion and predictive positioning. Every movement served multiple purposes, defense becoming immediate counter, retreat setting up future advantage. Naruto adjusted his approach repeatedly, testing different combinations against her style. He deliberately limited his more destructive techniques while still presenting genuine challenge, focusing on learning rather than overwhelming. After 30 minutes of increasingly complex exchanges, they paused by mutual agreement, both breathing heavily despite their exceptional stamina. "Your wind affinity," Ace noted, wiping sweat from her brow. "It resembles my wind magic but manifests differently." "I noticed that too," Naruto confirmed. "Your techniques are more structured. Deliberate application of specific effects. Mine flow more naturally but with less precise control." "The sage energy," Ace continued, "how does it interact with awareness?" Naruto considered how to explain. "It extends sensory range dramatically. I can feel energy signatures, movements, intentions at considerable distance. Natural energy flows become visible." Ace's eyes lit with rare animation. "That capability, it would transform dungeon exploration, monster detection, trap identification, resource location. It requires specific training," Naruto cautioned. "And in this world, the natural energy behaves differently, wilder, less predictable." "Teach me the fundamentals," Ace requested again. "I learn quickly." Naruto hesitated, considering potential risks. "The training I underwent took months of specialized instruction. And gathering too much natural energy without proper balance is dangerous, it can turn you to stone." Rather than being deterred, Ace seemed more interested. "A true risk threshold," she observed. "Not merely difficulty but consequence. This explains the power differential." "You're not concerned about potential petrification?" Naruto asked, somewhat bemused by her reaction. "Growth requires risk," Ace stated simply. "All meaningful advancement carries consequence of failure." Her matter-of-fact acceptance of potential danger reminded Naruto of his own determination during training. Despite her reserved exterior, Ace possessed the same driving will to improve that had pushed him beyond normal limitations. "All right," he conceded, "I can show you meditation techniques to begin sensing natural energy. But actual gathering attempts should wait until you've developed proper awareness." For the next hour, Naruto guided Ace through preliminary exercises, meditative poses, awareness expansion techniques, conceptual frameworks for understanding natural energy. To his surprise, she demonstrated remarkable aptitude, quickly grasping principles that had taken him significant time to comprehend. "You have natural talent for this," he acknowledged as they concluded the session. "Wind affinity compatibility perhaps," Ace suggested. "Are complementary development paths. Either way, impressive progress for first attempt." Ace nodded acknowledgement of the compliment. "We will continue these sessions." "If you'd like," Naruto agreed. "Though my schedule include tavern duties and further dimensional investigation." "Understandable," Ace replied. 3 mornings weekly would be sufficient to maintain progression. Her practical approach to training scheduling made Naruto smile. Agreed. As they gathered their equipment, Finn appeared at the training ground entrance. Productive session? He inquired. Yes, Ace confirmed simply. Good. Naruto, if you have a moment. Goddess Loki wishes to speak with you before you depart. Naruto followed Finn through the manor's elegant hallways to Loki's private study, a surprisingly cluttered space filled with maps, books, and curious artifacts. The goddess herself lounged across a chaise, apparently relaxed but with that same predatory awareness that never quite disappeared. Whisker boy, she greeted cheerfully. Heard you and Ace had quite the sparring match. She rarely shows such interest in others' techniques. She's incredibly skilled, Naruto replied honestly. I learned as much as she did. Diplomatic and truthful, Loki observed with amusement. Rare combination. Sit. I have updates from the guild investigation. Naruto took the offered chair. They found something. Yes and no, Loki replied, her expression turning more serious. The energy readings from your arrival point match nothing in current guild records. However, they did find a single historical reference that might be relevant. She produced an ancient-looking scroll, handling it with uncharacteristic care. This dates back nearly 1,000 years, early dungeon exploration records. An expedition encounter. What they described as warriors from beyond the veil, who appeared suddenly on the 24th floor, fought alongside adventurers against a monster outbreak, then disappeared equally mysteriously. Other dimensional travelers. Naruto leaned forward with interest. Possibly, Loki acknowledged. The description mentions strange magics without chant or Falna, and eyes that gathered nature. Ease power, which sounds remarkably similar to your sage abilities. That can't be coincidence, Naruto murmured, mind racing. Were they from my world specifically? Or other dimensions? The record is frustratingly vague, Loki admitted, but it establishes precedent for cross-dimensional contact, specifically on the same floor where you appeared. Something about that location must be significant, Finn observed. A natural weak point between dimensions perhaps. Or deliberately established connection, Loki suggested. The guild is researching further, but records from that era are fragmentary at best. Still, it's something, Naruto acknowledged. Better than complete mystery. Indeed, Loki agreed, her expression turning sly. Which brings me to the second purpose of this meeting. Word reaches me that Aikilo's familia approached you yesterday. Naruto raised an eyebrow at her information network's efficiency. News travels fast. I make it my business to know things, Loki replied with a dismissive wave. Particularly when other familia approach my interests. What did dear Aikilos want? Recruitment, allegedly, Naruto answered carefully. Though Ryuu seemed concerned about their motives. Lion has good instincts, Loki acknowledged. Aikilos operates in murky territories. Dream manipulation, consciousness exploration, boundary testing. Their interest in you is concerning. They claimed knowledge of dimensional travel, Naruto added. Ah. Loki's expression sharpened. That tracks with certain rumors. Their goddess has been conducting experiments in realm boundaries for centuries. Usually more focused on mental dimensions than physical ones, but the principles may overlap. Worth investigating then, cautiously, Loki advised. Aikilos plays complex games with multiple objectives. Never assume straightforward motivation when dealing with dream deities. Finn cleared his throat softly. Speaking of multiple objectives, perhaps we should address the other visitation. Loki's expression turned mischievous again. Yes, nearly forgot. You had quite the distinguished observer this morning. Observer? Naruto questioned, automatically tending sage senses to search for surveillance. Freya herself, Loki clarified with evident amusement. Watched your entire training session from the North Tower. Quite the honor. She rarely takes personal interest in observation. Great, Naruto sighed. The goddess collection hobby continues. She's escalating her interest, Finn noted more seriously. From reports to personal surveillance. Unusual even for her acquisition patterns. Something about you has thoroughly captured her attention, Loki agreed. Which is both advantageous and dangerous. Advantageous how? Naruto asked skeptically. While focused on you, she's less involved in other Orario politics, Loki explained with pragmatic frankness. And her interest keeps other familia from moving against you too directly. One wants to anger Freya by damaging her prospective acquisition. I'm not a possession to be acquired, Naruto stated firmly. Of course not, Loki agreed without sincerity. But perception creates useful protection while you establish yourself here. The goddess's practical approach to exploitation of circumstances reminded Naruto uncomfortably of certain Konoha elders. Yet he recognized the validity of her assessment. Sometimes appearances provided useful cover for actual intentions. Just be aware, Finn advised more sympathetically, that Freya's patience has limits. Eventually she will make a direct approach. I'll deal with that when it happens, Naruto replied. For now, I should return to the hostess for my shift. Loki waved lazily. Of course. Run along to your tavern duties. Just remember, my familia remains your official sponsor in Orario. Should you require assistance, we're available. I appreciate that, Naruto said with genuine gratitude. Despite her manipulative tendencies, Loki had provided valuable support since his arrival. As Finn escorted him toward the exit, the Palom captain spoke quietly. One last thing. Lion's involvement yesterday was fortuitous. Her knowledge and skills complement yours effectively. She's impressive, Naruto agreed. Though she downplays her capabilities. For good reason, Finn replied carefully. Her history is complicated. But having someone of her caliber watching your back is valuable. Consider maintaining that alliance. Something in Finn's tone suggested layers of meaning beyond the obvious tactical advice. Before Naruto could inquire further, they reached the manor entrance where Tiona waited, bouncing on her toes with characteristic energy. Escorting duty, she announced cheerfully. Captain says you need company back to the tavern. Finn smiled slightly. Given the interest you're generating, traveling alone seems unwise for now. Tiona volunteered. I don't want to impose, Naruto began. No imposition, Tiona interrupted, grabbing his arm. I want to hear all about how you kicked Aiza's butt in training. That's definitely not what happened, Naruto laughed as she pulled him toward the gate. Details, Tiona dismissed with a grin. The important part is you made her use serious techniques. Do you know how rare that is? As they walked through Orario's busy streets, Tiona provided running commentary on everything from familia politics to best food vendors to monster hunting techniques. Her boundless enthusiasm reminded Naruto of his younger self, Al with considerably more battle experience beneath the cheerful exterior. So what's with you and Lion? She asked abruptly, changing topics mid-sentence about favorite weapons. What do you mean? Naruto replied, caught off guard by the question. You know, Tiona wiggled her eyebrows suggestively. The whole working together thing. The looks, the synchronized fighting yesterday. We're colleagues, Naruto stated. Feeling strangely defensive, and she helped during the expedition. That's all. Tiona drawled skeptically. And I'm secretly a princess in disguise. Come on, Ion hasn't voluntarily adventured in years, then suddenly joins an expedition with you. Plus the way you fought together was not just colleagues, coordination. We have compatible fighting styles, Naruto insisted. Though he couldn't deny the unusual synchronicity they'd developed rapidly. Tiona studied his expression, then grinned triumphantly. You're interested. I knew it. I didn't say that, Naruto protested. Didn't have to. Your face did. She skipped ahead, then turned to walk backward while facing him. It's fine, you know. Lion deserves someone who appreciates her skills. She's been hiding at that tavern way too long. It's really not. Naruto began, then sighed as Tiona's attention visibly shifted to something behind him. Incoming goddess alert, she whispered dramatically. Don't look now, but Freya's personal assistant is following us. Naruto had already sensed the presence, a tall, slender man with silver hair maintaining consistent distance since they left the manor. I know, he's been there since we passed the central plaza. Tiona's eyes widened. You noticed without looking. That's Alan Frommel. He's practically invisible when he wants to be. Sage senses, Naruto explained simply. Hard to hide from nature itself. So cool, Tiona breathed. No wonder Freya's obsessed. You can probably tell when she's watching from anywhere. Not helping, Tiona, Naruto muttered as they turned onto the street leading to the hostess of fertility. Just saying, if you want to avoid becoming her newest collection piece, you might want to accelerate other options. She wiggled her eyebrows again meaningfully. Naruto chose to ignore the implication as they reached the tavern's entrance. Thanks for the escort, and the advice. Anytime, Whisker Face. Chiona grinned, punching his shoulder with friendly force that would have staggered someone without his enhanced durability. See you at next training session. Inside, the tavern was preparing for evening service. Sir greeted Naruto with her characteristic cheer, assigning him to help Mei with ingredient preparation. As he chopped vegetables with practiced efficiency, Naruto found himself considering Chiona's teasing observations about his interactions with Ryuu. True, they had developed unusual rapport in short time. Their fighting styles complemented each other naturally, and something in her reserved demeanor resonated with him, perhaps recognizing similar experiences of loss and recovery beneath the professional exterior. But romantic interest, that seemed premature given their BRIEF acquaintance and professional relationship. His thoughts were interrupted by the kitchen door opening to admit the subject of his contemplation. Ryuu entered carrying empty supply baskets, not an acknowledgement to Mei before noticing Naruto. Successful training, she inquired with characteristic economy of words. Educational, Naruto replied. A's has impressive technique. She is considered Orario's finest swordswoman for good reason, Ryuu agreed, sorting containers with efficient movements. Second finest, perhaps, Naruto suggested casually, watching for reaction. Ryuu paused momentarily before continuing her task. The Sword Princess has earned her reputation through consistent achievement. Not questioning that, Naruto clarified. Just observing that some might match her skill but choose not to demonstrate publicly. Their eyes met briefly, mutual assessment passing between them. Ryu's expression revealed nothing, but Naruto sensed the deliberate consideration behind her response. Past accolades mean little compared to current application, she finally stated. The Sword Princess applies her skills actively for her familia's benefit. The subtle self-criticism in her response intrigued Naruto. Different choices don't diminish capability, he observed. Sometimes the most difficult battles are fought away from public recognition. Something flickered in Ryu's eyes. Surprise at his perception, perhaps, a recognition of deeper understanding than she'd anticipated. Before she could respond, Mei interrupted with characteristic bluntness. Less philosophy, more vegetable chopping. Customers won't feed themselves. The moment dissolved as they returned to their respective tasks, but Naruto caught Ryuu glancing toward him several times with thoughtful consideration. Something had shifted again in their developing dynamic, another small step beyond professional association toward genuine connection. As evening service began, Naruto found himself contemplating the various relationships he'd begun forming in this world. Aiza's professional interest in his techniques, Chiona's boisterous friendship, Finn's strategic alliance, Loki's manipulative support. And now this undefined but increasingly significant connection with Ryuu. For someone who had arrived alone in a strange dimension less than a week ago, he had established surprising integration into Orario's complex social ecosystem. Not yet home, perhaps, but increasingly a place where he belonged. The tavern filled with its usual evening crowd, adventurers celebrating successful expeditions. Merchants conducting after-hours business, locals enjoying quality food and drink. Naruto navigated between tables with growing confidence, recognizing regular customers and anticipating needs before they were voiced. Near the end of the evening rush, the door opened to admit a group Naruto recognized immediately, Xanis and several Aikilo's familia members. Their entrance created subtle tension among knowledgeable patrons, conversations temporarily pausing before resuming with deliberate casualness. Mia caught Naruto's eye from behind the bar, her expression conveying clear instruction, professional service. Minimal engagement. Across the room, Ryuu had also noticed the arrivals, her demeanor unchanged but awareness heightened. Sir approached the group first, guiding them to a table in Naruto's section, deliberately. He suspected, to protect Ryuu from potential confrontation. As he took their order, Xanis offered a predatory smile. Tavern service suits you surprisingly well, interdimensional traveler, he observed. Though it seems rather mundane employment for someone of your unique capabilities. I enjoy the work, Naruto replied neutrally. What can I get for you this evening? Information, ideally, Xanis said, leaning forward slightly. Has the guild's investigation yielded insights worth sharing? My goddess remains most interested in your situation. The investigation continues, Naruto stated, maintaining his professional demeanor. Nothing conclusive yet. A pity, Xanus sighed theatrically. Though perhaps expected, the guild's resources for dimensional research are limited. Unlike some who specialize in boundary exploration, the implied offer remained tantalizing despite Naruto's wariness. Knowledge of interdimensional travel potentially meant a path home. I appreciate your goddess's continued interest, he replied diplomatically. Once the guild completes their initial assessment, I'd welcome additional perspectives. Xanus smiled, apparently satisfied with this non-committal response. Excellent. We shall remain patient then. He glanced around the tavern, his gaze lingering briefly on Ryuu before returning to Naruto. Interesting choices of association you've made since arriving. The Fallen Lion, Loki Familia, even Hestia's fledgling group. Quite the diverse network for someone so new to Orario. The implied surveillance was clear. They'd been monitoring his movements and interactions. I'm fortunate to have met helpful people, Naruto replied simply. Now, about those drinks. The remainder of their interaction remained superficially cordial, though undercurrents of assessment flowed beneath every exchange. Naruto provided professional service while revealing nothing substantial, conscious of both Mia's TCHFUL oversight and Ryu's periodic proximity as she served nearby tables. When Aikilo's Familia finally departed, the tavern's atmosphere noticeably relaxed. As closing time approached and customers thinned, Mia gestured Naruto to the bar. Handled that well, she acknowledged grudgingly. Didn't give them anything useful while maintaining service standards. Thanks, Naruto replied, though I am getting tired of being everyone's recruitment target. Get used to it, Mia advised bluntly. Until you establish clear affiliation or demonstrate enough power to discourage approaches, you'll remain Orario's most interesting unclaimed asset. Charming perspective, Naruto muttered. Mia's expression softened marginally. Look, kid, I've seen Orario politics for decades. Your situation is unprecedented, functional without Falna. Techniques nobody understands, background nobody can verify. That makes you valuable and dangerous simultaneously. So what would you recommend? Naruto asked, genuinely curious about her assessment. Mia considered the question seriously. Establish clear boundaries while building reliable alliances. Demonstrate enough capability to discourage casual TS without revealing your full potential. And decide what you actually want in this world besides just returning home. What I want, Naruto repeated, somewhat taken aback by the last suggestion. Yes, Mia stated firmly. Because return might take time, or prove impossible. You need purpose beyond. Get home, to function effectively here. The pragmatic advice struck Naruto deeply. He had been so focused on understanding his displacement and finding a return path that he'd given little thought to establishing longer-term purpose in this world. I'll consider that, he acknowledged thoughtfully. Good. Now finish cleanup so we can close. As Naruto assisted with final closing duties, he found himself working alongside Ryuu collecting glassware. They moved with the efficient coordinate ion that had already become habitual between them, anticipating each other's movements without communication. Aikilo's Familia will return, Ryuu observed quietly. Their interest seems genuine. You still don't trust their motives. No, she confirmed, though their knowledge may indeed prove valuable to your situation. Naruto studied her profile as she methodically arranged glasses. What would you do in my position? The question seemed to surprise her, her movements pausing briefly. You seek my counsel. I value your perspective, Naruto clarified. You understand Orario's complexities and seem to approach situations with careful consideration. Ryuu considered her response thoroughly before answering. I would proceed cautiously with all Familia approaches, Aikilo's included. Gather information independently before committing to any alliance. And, she hesitated briefly, I would establish connections based on demonstrated trustworthiness rather than promised advantage. Solid advice, Naruto acknowledged. Similar to what Mia suggested. Mia understands Orario politics well, Ryuu agreed. Her guidance is worth heeding. They continued working in comfortable silence for several minutes before Naruto spoke again. I've been thinking about what she said about establishing purpose here beyond just finding a way home. Ryuu glanced at him questioningly. Where I come from, Naruto explained. I had clear purpose, protecting my village, working toward becoming Hokage, maintaining peace between nations. Here, I've been focused solely on getting back. Understandable given your circumstances, Ryuu observed. Yes, but potentially limiting, Naruto acknowledged. If return takes time or proves complex, having interim purpose would provide direction. What purpose would you consider? Ryuu asked, genuine curiosity entering her tone. Naruto considered the question as they completed their tasks. In my world, I work to protect people, to bridge understanding between different groups. To maintain balance. Perhaps similar principles apply here, just in different context. The dungeon presents constant threat to Orario's population, Ryuu noted. And familia politics often overlook individual welfare in favor of organizational advantage. Exactly, Naruto agreed, feeling conceptual pieces aligning. My abilities work differently than established systems here. Maybe that outside perspective has value beyond just personal circumstances. Something in Ryuu's expression shifted. Subtle approval, perhaps, or recognition of developing clarity. A purpose built on contribution rather than acquisition would be unusual in Orario, she observed. But potentially meaningful. And you? Naruto asked carefully. What purpose guides you now? The question clearly crossed into personal territory, Ryuu's expression closing slightly. Yet after a moment's consideration, she offered a measured response. Atonement. Balance. Creating peace within limited parameters. Her eyes met his briefly. Reduced scope from previous ambitions, but sustainable. The simple statement conveyed volumes beneath its economy of words, past trauma, adjusted expectations. Carefully defined boundaries. Naruto recognized the pattern of someone who had experienced significant loss yet continued forward with recalibrated purpose. Scope can expand again when foundations strengthen, he suggested quietly. Ryuu's eyes widened slightly at the perception behind his comment. For a moment, something vulnerable flickered across her features before her composed expression returned. Perhaps, was all she said, but the single word carried unexpected weight. As they completed closing duties and staff dispersed to their quarters, Naruto found himself contemplating their conversation. Something about Ryuu's carefully constrained purpose resonated with him, recognizing in her controlled demeanor not lack of feeling but rather its deliberate management. Protection of remaining capacity for connection after significant damage. In his room, Naruto created his customary surveillance clone before preparing for sleep. The day had brought progress on multiple fronts. Advancement in understanding his dimensional displacement, development of alliance possibilities, clarification of potential interim purpose, and deepening connections with this world's inhabitants. Most significantly, perhaps, was the growing recognition that while finding a path home remained primary, establishing meaningful existence in this world need not be merely a fallback position. Both objectives could proceed simultaneously, each potentially informing the other. As sleep approached, Naruto's thoughts returned to Ryuu's carefully measured statement of purpose, atonement, balance. Peace within limited parameters. Behind those controlled words he sensed a story of loss and recovery that paralleled aspects of his own journey, different in specifics but similar in fundamental pattern. A connection worth exploring, he decided as consciousness faded. Another bridge between worlds forming one relationship at a time. Chapter 2 End Chapter 3, Eastern Winds. Cherry Blow. SSOMS drifted through Naruto's dreams, pale pink against azure sky, scattering like memories on a breeze that carried the scent of distant mountains. He stood in a grove where massive trees rose like pillars, their ancient bark etched with symbols that stirred recognition without comprehension. You have crossed the veil, spoke a voice that seemed composed of rustling leaves and flowing water. The first in generations. Naruto turned, finding himself face to face with an elderly figure seated in lotus position atop a moss-covered stone. The man's weathered face bore markings similar to sage mode but permanent, etched into skin like ancient tattoos. His eyes, solid gold without pupil or white, reflected Naruto's image back at him. Who are you? Naruto asked, immediately sensing this was no ordinary dream. I am the Keeper of Passages, the elder replied. The sage who tends the boundaries between realms. You know why I'm here. In this world, The sage nodded slowly, cherry bloss. Ohms drifting through his seemingly semi-substantial form. You are called Naruto Uzumaki. The balance falters. Old agreements fray. The wild and divine domains approach conflict. What does that have to do with me? You stand between, the sage stated, raising gnarled hands that glowed with energy Naruto recognized as sage chakra, yet somehow different, more primal. Neither wild nor divine. Both and neither. The bridge that may prevent collision. I don't understand, Naruto protested. I just woke up in the dungeon without explanation. The elder sage's expression remained impassive. Understanding comes through experience, not explanation. Seek the Fox Priestess from Eastern Shores. She carries knowledge of the old ways. Fox Priestess, Eastern Shores. The boundary between worlds thins where natural power flows strongest, the elder continued as if Naruto hadn't spoken. The divine seeks to contain. The wild seeks to expand. You must. The sage's final words dissolved into cherry blossoms as consciousness pulled Naruto abruptly from the dreamscape. He awoke with a sharp intake of breath, morning light streaming through his window at the hostess of fertility. His surveillance clone, still maintaining meditation position near the window, turned toward him with sage-marked eyes. You experienced connection, the clone observed. I felt the energy surge. Naruto nodded, sitting up and pressing his palms against his eyes. Some kind of elder sage, talking about boundaries between worlds and a fox priestess from the east. Fox, the clone repeated with interest. Like Kurama, maybe. He wasn't clear. Naruto sighed, dropping his hands. Just cryptic warnings about balance and conflict between wild and divine domains. The clone considered this. The natural energy flows have been mapping show increasing fluctuation, especially beneath the guild headquarters and Eastern Quarter. Eastern Quarter, Naruto repeated thoughtfully. The sage mentioned Eastern Shores. Maybe there's a connection. Worth investigating. The clone agreed before dispelling, transferring its accumulated observations to Naruto's consciousness. After washing and dressing for the day, Naruto descended to find the tavern already bustling with breakfast preparation. Mia looked up from inventory ledgers as he entered the kitchen. You're off shift until noon, she reminded him. Something about investigating the Eastern District. Naruto blinked in surprise. How did you talk in your sleep? Mia interrupted with a dismissive wave. Mentioned East, RN Shores and Fox, enough times to wake Sir in the next room. She reported it this morning. Sorry about that, Naruto said, somewhat embarrassed. Mia shrugged. We all have dreams. Yours just happened to be interdimensional prophecies. Apparently. Her expression turned more serious. The Eastern District does have significant shrine presence. Immigrants from the far eastern continent established cultural enclaves there decades ago. Quote, worth checking out then, Naruto decided. Maybe I'll find this fox priestess the dream mentioned. Take Lion with you, Mia stated, returning to her ledgers. Again, she has morning duties here. Covered, Mia replied without looking up. She knows Eastern customs better than most in Orario. And after yesterday's Aikilo's incident, traveling alone seems unwise. Naruto wanted to protest that he could handle himself, but recognized the practical wisdom in Mia's suggestion. If she's willing. Already agreed, Mia said with finality. She's waiting out front. Sure enough, Ryuu stood near the tavern entrance, dressed not in her server uniform or adventuring gear but in simple civilian attire, a light blue tunic over practical trousers, her short hair partially covered by a loose hood that downplayed her elvish features. The outfit suggested deliberate anonymity rather than disguise. Morning, Naruto greeted as he approached. Mia volunteered your services as cultural guide. She mentioned your nocturnal revelations, Ryuu replied neutrally. The Eastern District can be complicated for outsiders to navigate. Certain areas require specific etiquette. I appreciate the assistance, Naruto said sincerely. Though I'm sorry if it disrupted your normal routine. Something resembling amusement flickered briefly in Ryu's eyes. Routine has become significantly less predictable since your arrival. Naruto grinned. I have that effect on people. So I've observed. They set off through Orario's awakening streets, the morning commerce beginning as shops opened and early patrons headed toward the dungeon entrance. Naruto noted how Ryuu navigated the growing crowds with subtle efficiency, choosing routes that minimized NTION while maintaining clear sightlines, habits of someone accustomed to both evasion and vigilance. Have you visited the Eastern District before? Ryu asked as they turned onto a wider avenue. Never, Naruto admitted. My exploration of Orario has been limited to tavern, dungeon, and guild headquarters so far. It's distinctive, Ryu explained. When immigrants from the Eastern continent arrived generations ago, they recreated architectural and cultural elements from their homeland. The district maintains many traditions otherwise unseen in Orario, including fox priestesses. Naruto asked hopefully. Possibly, Ryu acknowledged. Eastern spiritualism includes significant animal symbolism. Foxes represent cunning, magical potential, and boundary crossing in their traditions. As they continued eastward, the city's character gradually transformed. Western-style stone buildings gave way to structures with curved tile roofs, wooden support pillars, and delicate paper screens. Signs featured elegant pictographic script alongside common language translations. Even the street layout changed, becoming more circular rather than the grid pattern of central Orario. This feels. Naruto paused, searching for the right words. Familiar somehow, like places I've visited in my world. Your world has similar cultural expressions? Ryu inquired, genuine curiosity entering her tone. Yes, we have nations with architecture and customs very similar to this. The land of tea, certain regions of the land of fire. He gestured toward a torii gate spanning the street ahead. Quote, those same gates mark sacred spaces where I come from. Interesting convergence, Ryu observed thoughtfully. Perhaps certain cultural patterns transcend dimensional boundaries. They passed Bania, the Vermilion Gate into what was clearly the district's ceremonial heart. The street widened into a plaza surrounding a central shrine complex, multiple wooden buildings connected by covered walkways. All centered on a main hall raised slightly above ground level. Cherry trees in full bloom scattered pink petals across stone pathways, creating a scene so similar to Naruto's dream that he stopped momentarily in surprise. Something wrong? Ryu asked, noting his reaction. This place, it was in my dream. Those exact cherry trees. Naruto stared at the shrine complex with growing certainty. The elder sage appeared in a setting just like this. Ryu studied him carefully, clearly weighing skepticism against his evident conviction. The Eastern Cherry Shrine is among the oldest spiritual sites in Orario, she finally said. Established during initial settlement by Eastern immigrants. If there are indeed spiritual connections to explore, this would be a logical focal point. They approached the shrine entrance, where stone fox statues stood sentinel on either side of a purification fountain. Ryu demonstrated the proper cleansing ritual, washing hands and mouth with the ceremony. Al ladle, which Naruto followed with careful attention to detail. Inside the main shrine grounds, white-robed attendants swept pathways or tended gardens with focused serenity. The atmosphere carried a distinctive energy that Naruto's sage-enhanced senses immediately detected, similar to Orario's natural energy but more refined, as if deliberately cultivated rather than occurring naturally. The energy here feels different, Naruto murmured, more structured, yet still connected to nature's flow. Eastern spiritual practices often involve energy channeling, Ryu explained quietly. Not unlike magic, but focusing on harmony with natural elements rather than manipulation of them. As they approached the main hall, an elderly attendant noticed their arrival and bowed respectfully. Welcome to Eastern Cherry Shrine. Have you come to pray, make offering, or seek consultation? We seek information, Ryu replied with a formal bow Naruto quickly mirrored. Regarding fox symbolism and pay, perhaps a priestess associated with such traditions. The attendant's expression shifted subtly, eyes moving between them with increased assessment. May I inquire as to the nature of this interest? Before Ryu could formulate a diplomatic response, Naruto decided on directness. I was guided here through a dream by an elder sage who told me to seek the fox priestess from eastern shores. He said, she carries knowledge of old ways and boundaries between realms. The attendant's eyes widened, elderly composure momentarily disrupted. Please wait here, he requested, bowing deeply before Hurien. G toward a side building with surprising speed for one of his apparent age. Direct approach, Ryu observed neutrally once they were alone. Seemed efficient, Naruto replied with a slight shrug. Quote, the dream was specific enough that obscuring details wouldn't help. Perhaps, Ryuu acknowledged, though shrine attendants typically prefer protocol to declarations about interdimensional dream guidance. Before Naruto could respond, the elderly attendant returned, accompanied by a middle-aged woman in elaborate ceremonial robes of white and vermilion. Her severe expression and deliberate movements suggested significant authority. "I am head priestess Kimiko," she introduced herself with minimal bow. "Hayato says you claim dream guidance from an elder sage seeking our fox priestess." "Yes," Naruto confirmed, though, "claim" suggests I'm fabricating the experience. Kimiko's eyes narrowed slightly at his directness. Dreams are subjective experiences easily influenced by suggestion or desire. We receive many enthusiastic visitors claiming spiritual guidance. Understandable skepticism, Naruto acknowledged. But this wasn't ordinary dreaming. The sage specifically mentioned boundaries between realms faltering and a coming conflict between wild and divine domains. He called me a bridge. Something in his specific terminology clearly registered with the priestess, her assessing gaze sharpening. These are precise terms, not commonly known outside certain traditions. She turned to Ryuu. "And you, what brings an elf to accompany this dreamer?" "Professional association," Ryuu replied formally. "And practical guidance through unfamiliar districts." Kimiko studied them both with renewed intensity before coming to some internal decision. "Follow me," she instructed, turning toward the rearmost shrine building without waiting for response. They followed her along covered walkways, passing through gardens designed with meticulous attention to natural harmony. Naruto noticed how energy flows converged more strongly as they approached the back shrine, subtle currents visible to his sage-enhanced perception that ordinary visitors would never detect. "You sense the energy patterns," Kimiko observed without turning, apparently noting his attention to invisible flows. "Yes," Naruto confirmed, impressed by her perception. "They're converging toward that building." "The inner sanctuary," Kimiko explained, built atop a natural energy spring that predates Orario itself. One of several such sites incorporated into the city's foundation. She led them to an ornate wooden building surrounded by a small stream crossed by 3 red bridges. Unlike the other shrine structures, this one bore elaborate carvings of foxes, some with multiple tails, along its support columns and roof beams. "Remove your footwear," Kimiko instructed at the entrance. "Speak only when addressed while inside. The sanctuary houses artifacts and focuses energy patterns that disturbances can disrupt." After complying with her instructions, they entered a space that immediately intensified Naruto's sage senses. The interior featured a central meditation platform surrounded by in pillars carved with intricate symbols reminiscent of those from his dream. Candles burned with unnaturally steady flames, casting light on wall scrolls depicting fox spirits interacting with humans in various ceremonial settings. Most striking was the young woman kneeling at the central altar, back toward them as she arranged ceremonial implements with practiced precision. Her elaborately layered kimonos in shades of white, gold, and pale blue contrasted with vibrant fox red hair arranged in traditional style with decorative pins. "Lady Haruhime," Kimiko announced formally. "Visitors have come seeking the fox priestess based on dream guidance from an elder sage." The young woman paused in her preparations, then turned with fluid grace that suggested extensive formal training. Naruto's breath caught involuntarily, not merely from her striking beauty, but from immediate recognition of the energy signature she radiated. She wasn't entirely human. Golden eyes with vertical pupils guarded him with immediate recognition that mirrored his own. Her delicate features held subtle vulpine qualities, barely perceptible to ordinary observation but unmistakable to Naruto's enhanced senses. Most tellingly, 9 tiny fox tails embroidered on her outermost kimono seemed to shimmer with faint energy, responding to his presence. "The sage-touched visitor from beyond the veil," she stated, in melodious voice carrying formal cadence. "Your arrival was foretold in the pattern casting 3 days ago." "You were expecting me?" Naruto asked, momentarily forgetting the instruction to speak only when addressed. Rather than taking offense, Haruhime smiled slightly, an expression that softened her formal demeanor and revealed genuine warmth beneath ceremonial presentation. "The pattern's Augusted a boundary crosser bearing dual nature would appear," she explained, rising gracefully to approach them. "One connected to fox spirit energies yet not bound by them. One who walks in sage awareness as naturally as breathing." Her golden eyes studied him with scholarly precision. You carry nine-fold energy like my own, yet manifested differently. Naruto glanced at Ryuu, whose neutral expression couldn't completely mask her surprise at the priestess's specific insights. I am Haruhime Sanjuno, the priestess introduced herself with formal bow. Hereditary keeper of fox spirit traditions from the eastern continent. Currently serving as cultural ambassador to Orario. She gestured toward the meditation platform. Please, join me for proper conversation. Your journey suggests urgency beneath ceremony. As they seated themselves on cushions around a low table, Kimiko quietly withdrew, leaving them alone in the sanctuary. Haruhime prepared tea with ritualistic movements that Mahou managed to be both precisely formal and naturally fluid. Your world has fox spirits as well, she observed as she served the steaming beverage in delicate cups. I sense the connection within you, dormant currently, but present. Kurama, Naruto acknowledged, deciding honesty would yield more productive exchange than evasion. The nine-tailed fox sealed within me as an infant. We've become partners over time rather than prisoner and jailer. Haruhime nodded as if this confirmed existing suspicions. In my lineage, the connection manifests differently. The Sanjuno family has served as vessels for fox spirit knowledge for generations, each daughter born with partial vulpine essence. You're part fox? Naruto asked, then winced at his bluntness. Haruhime smiled again, seemingly unbothered by his direct approach. Kitsune touched as the traditional term. My ancestors made pacts with fox spirits that altered our bloodline. In exchange for certain capacities and extended lifespan, we maintain their traditions and knowledge, which includes understanding of boundaries between realms, Naruto guessed, recalling the elder sage's guidance. Indeed, Haruhime confirmed, setting down her teacup with deliberate precision. The fox spirits exist partially between realms, capable of traversing boundaries others find impermeable. This knowledge became particularly valuable when the gods descended to the mortal realm, creating new interactions between divine and natural domains. Ryuu, who had remained silently observant, finally spoke. You believe Naruto's arrival connects to this boundary knowledge? Haruhime turned her golden gaze to the elf, assessing with respectful attention. His presence here violates established dimensional barriers. Such crossings historica LLY occur only during periods of significant imbalance between domains. The timing aligns with concerning patterns we've observed recently. What patterns? Naruto asked. Haruhime gestured toward a large scroll mounted on the sanctuary's back wall, depicting a complex circular diagram with 9 interconnected spirals. The balance wheel represents harmony between domains, divine influence, natural energy, mortal endeavor, and spiritual essence. For centuries since the gods' descent, these forces maintained workable equilibrium despite occasional tensions. She rose and approached the scroll, touching specific sections with reverent precision. Approximately 3 months ago, our ritualists detected fluctuations in natural energy flows throughout Orario. Specifically, wild energy from the dungeon's deepest levels pushing upward with unprecedented force while divine essence simultaneously intensified its containment patterns. Opposing pressures building, Naruto translated, remembering the elder sage's warnings. Precisely, Haruhime confirmed, like tectonic plates pressing against each other, initially imperceptible but potentially catastrophic if release occurs without controlled harmonization. And my arrival, Naruto prompted, represents either symptom or potential solution, Haruhime stated. Your energy signature combines elements typically separate in our world. The structured discipline of divine blessing and the wild adaptability of natural essence. You exist outside our established system while containing compatible elements. The bridge between domains, Naruto murmured, echoing the elder sage's terminology. Haruhime nodded, returning to her seat. Your sage abilities particularly interest me. They resemble ancient practices from Eastern traditions. Arts largely abandoned after the gods' descent made Falna development more efficient. They function differently here than in my world, Naruto explained. The natural energy feels wilder, less structured, and interacts differently with my internal chakra. Fascinating. Haruhime leaned forward slightly, scholarly interest animating her formal demeanor. In Eastern traditions, wild energy was never considered inferior to divine blessing, merely different in application. Our oldest texts describe sage practitioners who could channel natural energy from specific convergence points, achieving effects impossible through Falna development. Convergence points, Naruto questioned. Places where natural energy flows concentrate, Haruhime explained. Like springs beneath the surface. This sanctuary sits atop one such point. Which is why energy patterns feel more structured here. Centuries of ritualistic focus has harmonized the flow. Ryuu, who had been quietly processing this information, spoke again. You believe there are connections between these convergence points and the dungeon? More than connections, Haruhime confirmed. We believe they are fundamentally the same system. The dungeon itself may be the physical manifestation of natural energy attempting to balance divine influence in this world. The implications of this perspective struck Naruto with sudden clarity. So monsters aren't random manifestations, they're natural energy taking physical form as counterbalance to divine power. An oversimplification, but essentially correct, Haruhime agreed. Which explains why gods cannot enter the dungeon without severe consequences, why monster crystals power magical items, and why the dungeon continuously regenerates despite centuries of adventurer activity. A self-balancing system, Naruto mused, mind racing with connections to his own world's natural energy principles. But something's disrupting that balance now. Yes, Haruhime's expression turned grave. Our diviners believe divine and natural domains approach critical disequilibrium. Without intervention, the resulting collision could devastate Orario and beyond. And I'm supposed to prevent this somehow? Naruto asked skeptically, based on cryptic dream guidance from an elder sage. To his surprise, Haruhime laughed softly, a melodious sound that transformed her ceremonial solemnity into something more approachable. Put so directly, it does sound rather imposed upon you. But consider, of all possible dimensional boundaries to cross, you appeared precisely when and where intervention might prove most effective. With precisely the combination of abilities potentially capable of addressing the imbalance. Coincidence seems unlikely, Ryuu observed quietly. Exactly, Haruhime agreed. Though whether your arrival was orchestrated by greater forces or represents natural systemic response remains uncertain. Naruto sighed, running a hand through his hair. Either way, I'm here now. The question becomes what practical steps this bridge between domains should take. Haruhime's expression brightened at his pragmatic approach. First, I believe we should investigate your sage abilities can directly influence the boundary instabilities. There exists a location where assessment would be both informative and relatively safe, a minor convergence point beneath the eastern district that our tradition maintains. Essentially a controlled testing environment, Ryuu translated. Precisely, Haruhime confirmed. If you're willing, we could proceed there after completing our tea ceremony. Naruto glanced at Ryuu, who offered a subtle nod of approval. We're at your disposal, Lady Haruhime. The fox priestess smiled, her golden eyes warming. Please, just Haruhime among colleagues in this endeavor. Ceremony has its place, but addressing dimensional imbalance may require more direct communication. Agreed, Naruto returned her smile. Let's see what we see. And discover about these convergence points. The minor convergence point, Haruhime led them to prove to be an elaborate network of underground chambers accessed through a hidden entrance behind the main shrine complex. Ancient stone stairs descended into darkness, illuminated only by paper lanterns Haruhime activated with practiced touches. Unlike the dungeon's oppressive atmosphere, these passages carried a sense of deliberate design, carved symbols along walls channeling energy in controlled patterns visible to Naruto's sage perception. These tunnels predate Orario's foundation, Haruhime explained as they descended. When the city was established, Eastern immigrants recognized the energy patterns and incorporated them into their spiritual practices. They're beautiful, Naruto observed, noting how the carved channels guided natural energy like irrigation systems directing water. Functional and artistic simultaneously, a fundamental principle of Eastern traditions, Haruhime agreed, pleased by his perception. Harmony between function and form, practicality and beauty. Ryuu moved with characteristic alertness despite the apparently safe environment, her gaze systematically scanning their surroundings. These passages connect to the dungeon. Not directly, Haruhime clarified. They run parallel to dungeon structures but maintain separation. Think of them as carefully managed tributaries alongside a powerful river, connected to the same source but deliberately channeled for specific purposes. They reached a circular chamber perhaps 20 meters in diameter. Its domed ceiling covered in elaborate spiral patterns that converged at the center. The floor featured a similar design carved into stone, with 9 smaller circles arranged around a central place. Platform raised slightly above the main level. The reflection chamber, Haruhime announced, her voice carrying subtle reverence. For centuries, Eastern practitioners gathered here to harmonize with natural energy currents. Developing techniques later abandoned when Falna became the dominant power system. Naruto immediately sensed the concentrated energy flowing through the chamber, not as overwhelming as the dungeon's wild currents, but noticeably stronger than surface locations. The flows moved in deliberate patterns, guided by the architectural design into harmonious circulation. It's a training hall designed specifically for sage practitioners, he observed with growing excitement. The energy channels create ideal conditions for gathering natural energy without being overwhelmed by it. Precisely its purpose, Haruhime confirmed, watching his reaction with scholarly interest. Would you demonstrate your sage techniques here? I'm particularly interested in how they interact with our established patterns. Naruto nodded, moving to the central platform while Haruhime and Ryuu remained near the entrance. He settled into meditation position, closing his eyes to focus on the unique energy characteristics of this controlled environment. The difference was immediately apparent. Unlike the dungeon's chaotic currents or the surface world's diffuse patterns, here the Nadu raw energy flowed with deliberate harmony, easier to gather, more responsive to his channeling techniques. When he opened his eyes, now transformed with orange pigmentation and horizontal pupils, he could see the entire chamber's energy system with unprecedented clarity. Remarkable, he breathed, observing how his presence affected the established patterns. The energy responds to my chakra almost like it recognizes it. Your signature resonates with the chamber's design, Haruhime observed, her golden eyes widening with academic excitement. The patterns are adjusting to accommodate your specific frequency. Naruto stood, maintaining sage mode with unusual ease in this environment. It's different from gathering sage energy in my world. There, it required perfect stillness. Here, at least in this chamber, the energy seems almost eager to be channeled. Try forming one of your techniques, Haruhime suggested. Naruto extended his hand, focusing on creating a Rasengan. The swirling sphere formed with standard chakra. But as he deliberately incorporated the chamber's natural energy, something unexpected occurred. The Rasengan's blue core developed a golden outer layer that extended in 9 distinct spiral patterns, reminiscent of the chamber's design but uniquely modified. That's never happened before, Naruto stated, studying the modified technique with fascination. Haruhime approached carefully, circling to observe the phenomenon from different angles. The chamber's energy patterns are integrating with your technique, enhancing its structure while maintaining your original intent. Extraordinary adaptation. Even Ryuu moved closer, professional curiosity overcoming her cautious observation. The pattern resembles certain advanced magic circle designs, she noted, but formed spontaneously rather than through formal construction. Naruto allowed the technique to dissipate, but maintained sage mode to continue studying the chamber's response to his presence. This confirms my sage abilities can directly interact with this world's natural energy systems in constructive ways. But how does that help address the boundary instabilities? Haruhime's expression turned thoughtful. According to Eastern traditions, imbalances between domains manifest first as disrupted energy patterns before escalating to physical effects. If your abilities can influence energy patterns at fundamental levels, you might potentially stabilize boundary regions by harmonizing conflicting currents. Theoretical but promising, Ryuu observed pragmatically. Indeed, Haruhime agreed. The next logical step would be examining an actual boundary disturbance site with these insights in mind. Back to the dungeon, Naruto concluded, unsurprised by the inevitable direction. Unfortunately, yes, Haruhime confirmed, though I believe we should investigate a different location than your arrival point. There exist several known boundary thinning sites throughout the Engine's middle levels, areas our tradition has monitored for generations. You monitor the dungeon? Ryuu questioned with subtle surprise. Haruhime smiled mysteriously. The Eastern District Maintai, NS various specialized knowledge that complements conventional adventuring. While we don't form traditional familia or pursue typical dungeon objectives, certain practitioners make regular observations of significant energy phenomena. Hidden experts, Naruto translated with appreciation. Focusing on understanding the system rather than exploiting it. An accurate assessment, Haruhime acknowledged. Though we maintain low profile deliberately. Divine authorities historically discourage investigation into fundamental systems they themselves established. Political complications, Ryuu noted with understanding. Precisely. Haruhime agreed, which is why I suggest proceeding with discretion regarding our investigations. Perhaps under the guise of cultural exchange and training exerc. Is rather than boundary stability research. Naruto nodded thoughtfully. Makes sense. The guild's already monitoring my activities anyway, giving them a straightforward explanation for Eastern Dist. RICT visits provides cover for deeper investigation. Efficient approach, Ryuu concurred. Though securing dungeon access for Lady Haruhime may present challenges without revealing true objectives. Please, again, just Haruhime. The priestess corrected gently. And regarding dungeon access, I maintain appropriate credentials through the Cultural Exchange Division, a minor guild department overseeing historical research and artifact authentication. Naruto's respect for the seemingly formal priestess continued growing. Beneath her ceremonial presentation lay practical knowledge of Orario's systems and how to navigate them effectively. So we have a plan, he summarized. Cultural exchange is cover for investigating boundary disturbances, starting with stable sites before potentially addressing actual instabilities. Well articulated, Haruhime smiled approvingly. Though I suggest beginning with theoretical foundation before field investigation. Eastern traditions maintain extensive records regarding boundary phenomena that might provide valuable context for your unique abilities. Research before action, Naruto agreed, though his natural inclination toward direct engagement made the scholarly approach slightly less appealing. When can we start? I'm available to begin knowledge transfer immediately, Haruhime offered. Though I imagine your tavern duties impose scheduling constraints. Naruto glanced at Ryuu, who had been quietly assessing the unfolding partnership. I'm scheduled for evening shift today, he confirmed. But mornings could work for research sessions. A practical arrangement, Haruhime nodded. Beginning tomorrow perhaps, that would allow me to prepare appropriate materials. Tomorrow morning it is, Naruto agreed, feeling genuine optimism for the first time since arriving in this world. Finally, concrete direction rather than merely reacting to circumstances. As they prepared to leave the underground chamber, Haruhime paused, her expression turning more serious. There is one additional matter I should mention before we proceed further. She hesitated briefly. The dream guide you mentioned, the elder sage, represents a significant figure in Eastern traditions. His appearance suggests involvement from entities typically removed from direct intervention. Meaning, Naruto prompted, meaning your arrival likely holds greater significance than merely addressing current boundary instabilities, Haruhime explained carefully. In our oldest texts, elder sages appear only during pivotal transitions, periods when fundamental systems face potential transformation rather than mere adjustment. The implication hung in the air between them. Naruto's presence potentially signaled not just crisis intervention but systemic change. No pressure, he commented with wry humor. Just potentially restructuring how your entire world functions. Haruhime's serious expression softened into an appreciative smile. Your temperament may be your greatest asset in this situation. The texts suggest boundary crossers bring not just needed abilities but essential perspectives, ways of seeing beyond established patterns. I've been told I have a unique perspective before. Naruto acknowledged, though usually it was meant as criticism of conventional approaches. Conventional approaches rarely address unconventional challenges effectively. Haruhime observed with surprising pragmatism beneath her formal demeanor. Your arrival may represent precisely the disruption this situation requires. As they ascended back toward the surface world, Naruto found himself appreciating the Fox Priestess's combination of traditional knowledge and practical adaptability. Unlike the gods he'd encountered so far, who seemed to approach Hi's situation with personal interest or political calculation, Haruhime offered perspective based on historical patterns and systematic understanding. Emerging into afternoon sunlight, they made arrangements Meant to meet the following morning for beginning formal knowledge exchange. Haruhime provided a small ceremonial token, a wooden fox carving that served both as shrine access credential and symbolic connection to Eastern traditions. Until tomorrow, she bowed formally before returning to her duties, her elaborate robes catching sunlight as she moved with practiced grace back toward the inner sanctuary. Well, Naruto said as they began walking back toward Central Orario, that was unexpectedly productive. Indeed, Ryuu agreed, her tone thoughtful. Lady Haruhime offers unique perspective on your situation. Her Eastern tradition knowledge provides context Western Orario practices often overlook. You know her? Naruto asked, noting the subtle respect in Ryuu's assessment. By reputation primarily, Ryuu clarified. The Sanjuno lineage is well regarded among those familiar with Eastern traditions. They maintain diplomatic connections between continental powers and Orario govern ants while preserving cultural knowledge others consider obsolete. She seems to genuinely want to help, Naruto observed. Without obvious personal advantage, rare in Orario, Ryuu acknowledged. Though alignment between her traditional responsibilities and your situation creates natural cooperation opportunity. They walked in comfortable silence for several blocks, each processing the morning's revelations. The Eastern District gradually gave way to Central Orario's more familiar architecture as they approached main thoroughfares leading back toward the hostess of fertility. What do you think about her theory? Naruto finally asked. About the dungeon being natural energy's physical manifestation balancing divine influence. Ryuu considered the question with characteristic thoroughness before responding. It presents compelling alternative to conventional understanding. Most adventurers view the dungeon merely as monster source and resource provider. Considering it as funda, mental balancing system within world order offers different perspective on its purpose. And monsters as manifestations of natural energy rather than just enemies to defeat, Naruto added thoughtfully. Makes me wonder about the specialized monsters we encountered at the breach site. If they represented natural system response to boundary disruption, then your arrival potentially triggered protective mechanisms. Ryuu completed his thought, consistent with balancing system theory. But I'm supposedly here to help address imbalances, not create them. Naruto frowned, the apparent contradiction bothering him. Perhaps initial response differs from longer-term integration, Ryuu suggested. Foreign elements typically trigger defensive rejection before potential acceptance. Like an immune response, Naruto nodded. The analogy resonating with his understanding of natural systems. Which means future dungeon interactions might change as I become less foreign to this world's energy patterns. Reasonable hypothesis, Ryuu agreed. The reflection chamber demonstrated positive integration capacity under controlled conditions. They had reached busier streets now, conversat. Ion necessarily becoming more circumspect as they navigated crowds of afternoon shoppers and adventurers returning from morning dungeon expeditions. Naruto noticed Ryuu's subtle but consistent awareness, her gaze periodically scanning rooftops and alleyways with practiced casualness that would be imperceptible to most observers. We're being followed again, he stated quietly, sage senses detectin'. Multiple presences maintaining systematic observation. Yes, Ryuu confirmed without changing her pace or demeanor. 3 distinct surveillance teams. Northwest rooftop, market crowd approximately 20 meters behind. And fancy carriage that has maintained parallel course since leaving Eastern District. Naruto was impressed by her precise awareness without obvious sage enhancement. Aikilos, Loki, and Freya, Ryuu supplied, nodding almost imperceptibly toward the elegant silver carriage visible intermittently through cross-street gaps. Her personal conveyance, distinctive design, popular guy, Naruto muttered. Though I'm not sure if I should be flattered or concerned by multiple goddess stalkers. The faintest hint of amusement touched Ryuu's expression. In Orario context, potentially both. Divine interest represents both opportunity and complication. Speaking from experience, Naruto asked, catching subtle personal knowledge beneath her objective assessment. Ryuu's expression closed slightly, professional neutrality reasserting itself, observation rather than direct experience. Divine attention rarely comes without eventual expectation. The minor withdrew. Wall reminded Naruto of her careful boundaries around personal history, a gentle warning he acknowledged with slight nod. Fair enough. Any suggestions for our multi-familia escort service? Direct confrontation achieves little, Ryuu advised. Observation itself harms nothing, and acknowledging awareness often escalates to interaction. So we ignore our admirers and proceed normally, Naruto translated. Most efficient approach, Ryuu confirmed. Unless direct intervention occurs. They continued toward the tavern, maintaining casual conversation while both remained acutely aware of their observers. Naruto found the shared situational awareness oddly comfortable, reminiscent of missions with fellow Jonin where unspoken vigilance formed natural background to outward normalcy. As they approached the hostess of fertility, the various surveillance teams maintained distance, Loki's observer departing rooftop position while Aikilo's follower merged deeper into market crowds. Only the silver carriage remained visible, now stationary at a respectful distance down the street. Seems they're respecting Mia's territory at least, Naruto observed. Wise policy, Ryuu noted with subtle approval. Mia's neutrality stance is well established in Orario politics. Even major familia typically avoid direct provocation near her establishment. Inside, the tavern buzzed with pre-dinner preparations. Mia glanced up from the bar as they entered, her sharp eyes assessing them briefly before returning to glass polishing. Productive morning, she inquired casually. Very, Naruto confirmed. Made contact with the fox priestess the dream mentioned. She's offered significant insights and assistance. Haruhime Sanjuno, Ryuu elaborated. Eastern traditions specialist with relevant knowledge regarding Naruto's situation. Mia nodded thoughtfully. Sanjuno lineage has solid reputation. Good connection to establish. Her expression turned more businesslike. Now get changed for evening shift. Expecting large crowd tonight. Adventurers returning from middle-level expedition will want celebration. The transition from interdimensional investigation to tavern service still occasionally struck Naruto as surreal. But he'd come to appreciate the grounding effect of ordinary responsibilities. After changing into work attire, he rejoined the staff for final dinner preparation, falling easily into established routines. Throughout the evening rush, Naruto found his thoughts periodically returning to the morning's discoveries. Haruhime's perspective on dungeon origins and boundary phenomena provided coherent framework for understanding his situation, the first truly systematic explanation since his arrival. Her fox spirit connection created additional resonance, reminding him of Kurama despite their different manifestations. During a brief lull between serving tables, he found himself working alongside Sir restocking supplies. The cheerful waitress bumped his shoulder playfully. "So how was your date with Ryuu?" she asked with mischievous smile. Naruto nearly dropped the glasses he was arranging. "It wasn't a date," he corrected quickly. Mia assigned her as guide to the Eastern District. Sir hummed skeptically. "And you two spent the entire morning together," returned looking all serious and contemplative, "and now keep exchanging those meaningful glances across the room." "What meaningful glances?" Naruto asked, genuinely confused. Sir sighed dramatically. "The ones where you check her position every few minutes and she pretends not to notice but always knows exactly where you are too. Very professional and not at all interested in each other." Naruto felt uncharacteristically flustered. Were colleagues handling complicated situations together? Awareness is just good practice. "If you say so," Sir replied with exaggerated innocence. "Though I've worked with Ryuu for years and never seen her volunteer for escort duty before. Mia usual. Why has to practically order her to leave tavern premises?" Before Naruto could formulate response, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. The tavern door had opened to admit a figure whose mere presence seemed to alter the establishment's atmosphere, conversations pausing, movements hesitating, attention inexorably drawn toward her. Freya, the goddess entered with casual confidence had somehow conveyed absolute certainty of welcome despite the disruption her appearance caused. Unlike her previous visit accompanied by Loki, this time she came with only a single attendant, the silver-haired man Naruto recognized as her observer from the previous day. The tavern's collective breath seemed held as she scanned the room, multicolored eyes eventually finding Naruto with unerring precision. Her smile conveyed personal satisfaction, as though his presence exactly where expected represented minor victory. "Oh my," Sir whispered beside him. "The goddess of beauty rarely makes personal appearances outside major functions. This is complicated." Naruto finished for her, setting down his supplies. "I'll handle it." Before he could move, Mia appeared beside Freya, her expert. Seijin maintaining professional neutrality despite the unexpected divine visitation. Goddess Freya, she acknowledged with minimal but appropriate respect. The hostess of fertility welcomes you. How may we serve you this evening? Mia. Freya returned the greeting with elegant inclination of her head. Your establishment's reputation for exceptional service draws me. I seek simple refreshment ND perhaps conversation with your newest staff member. Mia's eyes narrowed slightly at the transparent targeting, but tavern protocols regarding divine patrons limited her options. Of course. An available private room if you prefer quieter surroundings. Perfect. Freya smiled, the expression somehow both beautiful and predatory simultaneously. Her gaze returned to Naruto, who had approached with professional composure. You'll serve me directly, I trust. As Mia directs, Naruto replied diplomatically, unwilling to either refuse or eagerly comply with her obvious maneuvering. Mia's expression conveyed grudging approval of his response. Show Goddess Freya to the maple room, she instructed. I'll send appropriate refreshments. As Naruto guided Freya and her attendant toward the private dining area, he felt Ryu's attention from across the room, not interfering but acutely aware of the developing situation. The unspoken support somehow strengthened his resolve to handle the encounter appropriately. The maple room, named for its decorative wood paneling, offered elegant privacy without complete isolation. Freya settled gracefully at the table while her attendant took position near the door. His watchful presence somewhere between bodyguard and observer. Alan will remain outside, Freya instructed her companion once seated. This conversation requires appropriate intimacy. The silver-haired man's expression tightened almost imperceptibly, but he bowed compliance before withdrawing, closing the door with deliberate control that suggested reluctance beneath obedience. Your protector seems concerned about leaving you alone with me, Naruto observed as he arranged table settings with practiced efficiency. Freya laughed lightly, the sound like crystal chimes. Alan takes his duties quite seriously, though his concerns are misplaced in this instance. Her multicolored eyes studied Naruto with undisguised interest. You present no threat to me. That confident in your divine status? Naruto questioned, maintaining professional demeanor while refusing to be intimidated. Confident in my assessment of your character, Freya corrected, smiling though his directness pleased rather than offended her. You're not one who harms unnecessarily, regardless of capability. The accurate reading of his nature was more disconcerting than intimidation tactics would have been. What can I bring you this evening, Goddess Freya? So formal, she sighed dramatically. After I've made special journey specifically to see you. She gestured to the seat across from her. Join me, Naruto Uzumaki. Surely Mia grants staff occasional breaks during long shifts. I'm working, Naruto replied simply. And there are proper channels for meeting requests. Rather than taking offense at his refusal, Freya's expression brightened with what appeared to be genuine delight. Magnificent, she murmured, almost to herself. Such natural resistance to divine influence. Your soul truly is exceptional. The door opened before Naruto could respond, admitting Ryuu carrying a silver tray with wine, delicate glasses, and small accompaniments. Her expression remained professionally neutral as she arranged the items on the table. Compliments of the establishment, she stated formally. Will there be anything else, Goddess Freya? Freya's gaze shifted to Ryuu. Something calculating entering her expression. The fallen lion serves alongside our interdimensional visitor. How fascinating. Her attention returned to Naruto. You collect interesting associates. Atesh with remarkable speed for someone so recently arrived. People here have been welcoming, Naruto replied neutrally. Indeed, Freya smiled knowingly. Though I wonder if you understand what you're welcome to. She gestured dismissively toward Ryuu. That will be all for now. Though the dismissal bordered on rude, Ryuu merely bowed slightly before withdrawing, her eyes meeting Naruto's bridge. I.e. fly, a silent communication of support without interference. The door closed behind her with quiet precision. Now then, Freya continued once they were alone, pouring wine with elegant movements. Quote, let's dispense with unnecessary circling. You've captured my interest, Naruto Uzumaki. More significantly than any soul I've encountered in centuries. So I've heard, Naruto acknowledged, remaining standing despite her earlier invitation to sit. Though I'm not interested in being anyone's collection piece. Freya sipped her wine, studying him over the rim of her glass. Such mischaracterization of my intentions. Collection implies mere possession, static and unchanging. My interest lies in development, nurturing exceptional potential toward its fullest expression. Through joining your familia, Naruto stated flatly. Through proper alignment with divine patronage suited to your nature, Freya corrected smoothly. Your abilities function outside our established Falna system, true, BU. That merely presents opportunity for innovative arrangement rather than limitation. I'm still learning how this world functions, Naruto replied diplomatically. Making permanent commitments seems premature. Freya nodded as though his response confirmed positive assessment. Prudent approach. Though consider this, your investigation of dimensional boundaries proceeds more efficiently with appropriate resources and protection. Resources I can provide in abundance, protection few others in Orario can match. The practical appeal to his objective was cleverly calculated, acknowledging his priorities while framing her assistance as logical advantage rather than controlling influence. I appreciate the offer, Naruto said carefully. But I've already established productive connections for my investigations, including Eastern tradition specialists with particular knowledge of boundary phenomena. Something flashed in Freya's eyes, surprise quickly masked by renewed interest. The Sanjuno priestess, she stated rather than asked. Unexpected but intriguing alliance. Her fox spirit lineage resonates with your internal companion. Naruto concealed his shock at her specific knowledge of both Haruhime and Kurama. You're well informed. Divine perception reveals what mortal senses cannot, Freya replied with casual superiority. Your nine-tailed companion sleeps within you, are meant in this dimension but still fundamentally connected. The priestess carries different fox spirit influence through ancestral bloodline. Natural resonance between similar energies. The conversat. Ion's direction increasingly concerned Naruto. Freya's specific insights into private matters demonstrated information-gathering capabilities beyond normal observation. Is there something specific you wanted this evening? He asked directly. Besides demonstrating your surveillance capabilities. Rather than taking offense, Freya smiled with apparent appreciation of his directness. I came to extend formal invitation to visit Folkvanger, my familia's home. Not for recruitment, merely for mutual assessment of potential alignment. No commitments, simply conversation in more appropriate setting than service interruption. The offer seemed reasonable on surface, certainly more diplomatic than her previous collection statements. Yet Naruto sensed calculated strategy beneath cordial presentation. I'll consider it, he replied neutrally, once my current investigations reach appropriate stage for expansion. Fair response, Freya acknowledged, finishing her wine with graceful movement. I shall await your convenience. She rose with fluid elegance that somehow conveyed both conclusion and lingering interest. My appreciation for your establishment's hospitality. Please convey to M.I. that her newest staff member continues proving exceptional in all respects. Naruto accompanied her to the main room, where Alan waited with barely concealed impatience. The tavern's atmosphere remained altered by divine presence until Freya departed with final meaningful glance that somehow conveyed both promise and warning simultaneously. As the door closed behind her, collective breath released throughout the establishment. Normal conversation resumed, though with excited undertones regarding the unprecedented visitation. Mia appeared beside Naruto, her expression unreadable. Well handled, she acknowledged grudgingly. Maintained boundaries without causing offense. She's persistent, Naruto observed. And dangerous, Mia added flatly. Freya's interest typically ends one of two ways: complete acquisition or complete destruction. She tolerates no middle outcomes. Encouraging, Naruto muttered. Just reality, Mia shrugged. Now back to work. Divine visitations don't reduce customer service requirements. The remainder of the evening passed without further incident, though Naruto noticed increased attention from patrons who had witnessed Freya's personal interest. By closing time, he felt drained not from physical exertion but from navigating the complex social and political currents swirling around his presence in Orario. As staff completed closing duties, Naruto found himself working alongside Ryuu clearing final tables. They moved with the unconscious coordination that had quickly developed between them, anticipating each other's actions without verbal communication. Thank you for earlier, he said quietly. With Freya. Ryu glanced at him briefly. I provided standard service to a patron. And tactical support without interference, Naruto clarified. I noticed. Something resembling approval flickered across her features. You handled the situation appropriately. Diplomatic without submission. Coming from Ryu, the simple statement represented significant praise. She knows about Kurama, Naruto noted more seriously. And specific details about Haruhime's fox spirit connection. Her information gathering goes beyond normal observation. Divine perception functions differently than mortal awareness, Ryu explained. Gods perceive essence beneath physical manifestation, particularly those with specific domains related to the observed characteristic. And Freya's domains: beauty, love, war, death, Ryu listed with factual precision. She perceives souls rather than mere appearances. Evaluates based on essential nature rather than surface presentation. Which explains her persistent interest despite my lack of Falna, Naruto concluded thoughtfully. She's seeing something in my soul that particularly interests her. Precisely, Ryu confirmed, though her specific attraction criteria remain her closely guarded assessment methodology. They finished their duties in contemplative silence, each considering implications of the evening's developments. As staff dispersed toward quarters, Naruto found himself walking alongside Ryu up the stairs once again, a pattern becoming familiar in their daily routine. Tomorrow morning, Ryu said as they reached the landing. For your research session with Lady Haruhime. What time shall we depart? Naruto blinked in surprise. You're coming too. Eastern District navigation remains complicated, Ryu stated practically, and multiple familia surveillance continues. Mia would insist regardless. Of course, Naruto nodded, appreciating both the practical reasoning and unspoken support behind the statement. Haruhime mentioned starting at 9th bell. So perhaps departure at 8:30. Appropriate timing, Ryu agreed. Rest well, Naruto. Good night, Ryu, he replied, watching her turn toward her quarters with the same efficient grace that characterized all her movements. In his room, Naruto created his surveillance clone before preparing for sleep. Mind reviewing the day's significant developments. From dream guidance to Eastern traditions knowledge to divine visitation, each interaction added pieces to the complex puzzle of his presence in this world. Most promising was Haruhime's perspective on boundary phenomena and natural energy systems, finally providing coherent framework for understanding both his arrival and potential purpose here. The Fox Priestess offered balance between traditional knowledge and practical application that resonated with his own approach to challenges. As sleep approached, his thoughts returned to the Elder Sage's cryptic guidance. The bridge between domains, wild and divine forces approaching collision, balance faltering. Pieces were aligning, connections forming, direction emerging from initial confusion. Tomorrow would bring further knowledge through Eastern traditions research. Another step toward understanding his purpose in this world, and potentially, his path home. Cherry blossoms drifted through darkness, illuminated by moonlight that seemed to emanate from the flowers themselves rather than any celestial body. Naruto recognized the dreamscape immediately, the same grove where the Elder Sage had first appeared. This time, however, he stood alone among the ancient trees, their bark still etched with symbols he almost but couldn't quite comprehend. The air carried whispered conversations just beyond hearing range, like distant wind through leaves forming words never quite resolving into coherent sentences. Hello, Naruto called, his voice seeming to travel both outward and inward simultaneously. Elder Sage. No direct response came, but the grove itself seemed to react, trees shifting subtly, blossoms swirling in patterns too deliberate for natural air currents. The symbols on the bark illuminated briefly, pulsing in sequence that suggested language without translation. Naruto moved deeper into the grove, following intuition rather than visible path. The trees grew more ancient as he proceeded, their massive trunks twisted into shapes suggesting deliberate growth guided over centuries rather than natural development. He reached a clearing where 9 such trees formed perfect circle around central stone platform, the same arrangement as the reflection chamber beneath the eastern shrine, but entirely organic rather than constructed. Each tree featured different symbolic patterns, yet all connected through root systems visible above ground like deliberate sculpture. In the center stood not the Elder Sage but a magnificent fox, white-furred with golden eyes. 9 tails flowing behind it like banners. Unlike Kurama's massive form, this fox appeared normal-sized, yet carried presence that suggested contained power rather than limited capacity. "You seek the sage," the fox stated, its voice neither male nor female but somehow both simultaneously. "He cannot maintain consistent connection across dimensional boundaries. Energy patterns fluctuate too severely." "Who are you?" Naruto asked, approaching the circle's edge but not entering. "I am Messenger," the fox replied simply. "Boundary crosser like yourself, though in different capacity. The sage tasked me with facilitating communication until more stable connection establishes." "You're from my world?" Naruto questioned, searching for recognizable energy signature. "Neither yours nor this one exclusively," the fox corrected. "I exist partially in multiple domains, the nature of fox spirits since ancient times." It sat on its haunches, tails arranging themselves with deliberate symmetry. "Your connection to the Sanjuno priestess creates communication pathway previously unavailable. Her fox spirit lineage resonates with your 9 tails bond, allowing this intermediate contact. That's why the dream returned tonight after meeting Haruhime," Naruto realized. "Correct," the fox confirmed. "As your collaborative investigation proceeds, communication channels will strengthen, eventually allowing direct connection with the Elder Sage again." "And what's his message now?" Naruto asked, focusing on practical information rather than metaphysical mechanics. The fox's eyes gleamed with what might have been approval. 3 points of immediate relevance. First, boundary instabilities accelerate faster than initially calculated. Timeline for potential domain collision shortened considerably. "How long?" Naruto pressed. "Approximately 3 months before critical disruption begins," the fox stated. 6 months maximum before catastrophic domain collision occurs without intervention." "Great," Naruto muttered. "And the second point, natural energy convergence points contain stabilization potential," the fox continued. "The reflection chamber you visit. D today represents minor version of significant nexus points throughout this world. Locating major convergence points becomes priority objective. How many are there? Where are they located?" 9 primary nexus points exist," the fox explained. 3 currently known to Eastern traditions. 3 buried within dungeon depths. 3 hidden in remote locations beyond Orario's immediate influence. "And I need to find them all?" Naruto asked, already calculating the logistical challenges. "Not necessarily all," the fox clarified. "Minimum effective intervention requires harmonizing 5 nexus points simultaneously. Each point stabilized creates exponential rather than linear effect on overall system balance." "That's something at least," Naruto acknowledged. "And the third point?" The fox's expression seemed to intensify, its golden eyes fixing on him with heightened focus. "Divine authorities will resist systematic investigation once they recognize potential implications. Your act, IVTs already generate interest for individual capabilities. When pattern recognition reveals your actual objective, opposition will manifest from certain factions." "Which ones?" Naruto asked practically. "Those benefiting from current imbalance," the fox replied. "Gods who extract advantage from tension between domains. Their identities will become apparent as your investigation proceeds." The dreamscape began shifting, trees fading slightly as if connection weakened. The fox stood, tails moving with increased animation. "Our time grows short," it stated. "One final guidance. Trust the lion who walks beside you. Her path aligns with yours more significantly than either yet recognizes." "Ryuu?" Naruto questioned, surprised by the specific reference. "She carries wounds that mirror aspects of your own journey," the fox continued as its form began dissolving into swirling cherry blossoms. "Together you form connection stronger than individual capacity. Remember this when choices present themselves." Before Naruto could request clarification, the dreamscape collapsed entirely, consciousness pulling him back to physical reality with disorienting abruptness. He awoke with sharp inhale, early morning light filtering through his window at the hostess of fertility. His surveillance clone, still maintaining position near the window, turned toward him with evident concern. "Connection again," the clone stated. "Stronger this time. Your chakra fluctuated significantly during sleep cycle." Naruto nodded, sitting up and running hands through his hair. "Fox messenger instead of the elder sage. Connected to meeting Haruhime somehow." "Significant?" the clone asked, always focused on practical assessment. "Very. Naruto confirmed, quickly relating the dream's specific information regarding timeline, nexus points, and potential divine opposition. The clone considered this data with the same analytical approach as the original. Accelerated timeline necessitates more efficient investigation methodology. Eastern traditions research becomes higher priority with nexus point identification objective. Exactly, Naruto agreed, rising to prepare for the day. And Haru's knowledge just became even more valuable. As he dressed, Naruto contemplated the Fox Messenger's final guidance regarding Ryuu. The cryptic statement about mirrored wounds and combined strength suggested connections beyond their current professional association, potential partnership with deeper significance than either had recognized. His thoughts were interrupted by soft knock at his door. "Come in," he called. Assuming morning staff with message from Mia. The door opened to reveal Ryuu herself, already dressed for the day in the same civilian attire she'd worn previously to the Eastern District. Her expression showed subtle concern beneath professional composure. "You experienced another dream connection," she stated rather than asked, surprising Naruto with her perception. "How did you know?" "Energy fluctuation during night cycle," she explained concisely. "Visible to those with appropriate awareness. Similar pattern to previous occurrence before Eastern District visit." Naruto studied her with renewed interest. That she could detect such subtle energy phenomena without sage enhancement suggested considerably more sensitivity than most adventurers, another piece of her carefully concealed capabilities. "Yes," he confirmed. "More specific guidance this time. The timeline for whatever boundary collapse is approaching is shorter than expected. We have 3 to 6 months maximum before critical problems." Ryu's expression revealed nothing beyond focused attention, but her posture shifted subtly, the slight tension indicating recognition of genuine urgency rather than merely theoretical concern. "Then our research with Lady Haruhime becomes more immediately significant," she observed practically. "Exactly what I was thinking," Naruto agreed, appreciating her immediate focus on constructive response rather than alarm. The messenger mentioned nexus points, major natural energy convergence locations that could potentially stabilize the boundary problems if properly harmonized. "The Eastern Shrine likely maintains records of such locations," Ryuu suggested. "Historical documentation of significant spiritual sites forms core component of their traditional knowledge." "Let's find out," Naruto nodded, gathering his equipment with renewed purpose. Breakfast first, then Eastern District. As they headed downstairs, Naruto found himself appreciating Ryu's calm practicality in face of potentially world-threatening information. No excessive questions, no dramatic reactions, just immediate adjustment toward more efficient problem-solving approach. The Fox Messenger's words echoed in his mind. "Trust the lion who walks beside you. Her path aligns with yours more significantly than either yet recognizes." Looking at Ryu's composed profile, as they descended toward the day's challenges, Naruto found that guidance surprisingly easy to follow. Chapter 3 End. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.